Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee for October 16th, 2024. We'll need a mover and a seconder to open the meeting. Moved by Member Foisey, seconded by Member Langlois, that this meeting be opened at 6 p.m. All in favor? It's carried. I'll need a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as presented. Moved by Member Roblinski, seconded by Member Paquette. Moved by Member Roblinski, seconded by Member Paquette, that the agenda presented to the Planning Advisory Committee dated the 12th of November 2024 be adopted as presented. All in favor? It's carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Adoption of previous minutes. I'll need a mover and a seconder. Moved by Member Paquette, seconded by Member Roblinski, that the minutes of the Planning Advisory Committee of October 16th, 2024 be adopted as circulated. Any comments? All in favor? Okay. So we move into the purpose of tonight's meeting, which is to discuss the housekeeping bylaw workshop and discussions. So I'll say for those watching on the TV, there was an error in the fact that this agenda was not actually published on the website. So apologies for that. We'll ensure that that doesn't happen again. However, this housekeeping bylaw that we're discussing tonight is an internal conversation with the Planning Advisory Committee. So just for some context, the council has asked that the Planning Advisory Committee take on some of the heavy lifting to review kind of the different structures that we need to talk about, and it's all laid out in the agenda to get a sense as to what we think would be best for the municipality. From here, once this committee is satisfied with a direction, we will pass that this be brought forward to council for consideration. At that point, council will review the information and documentation and draft bylaw as recommended by this committee, and will take it under advisement and either pass it as is, make amendments, send it back to committee. Council has a number of different levers that they can pull at that point, but just so everyone's clear on the process, I don't know if there's any questions on that.
So, so the plan is, once we come up with something, are we letting the public then have us?
Yeah, so there will be public meetings to discuss. So part of council's process is the bylaw, the draft bylaw is open for conversations, and they can come to the council meeting, get on the agenda and speak to the council meeting. So there's opportunities for sure. And anybody really interested, obviously, watching this recorded on YouTube, and the direction that they're going to see each of us going in, or hopefully as a group going in, the public feedback can happen to any one of us that are sit on the committee. So if somebody has comments that they'd like to for the committee to recommend, they can obviously reach out to any of the committee members, and the committee members can bring that forward as well. So,
but if it's in council, you'd have to be put on as a delegate.
So zoning bylaw requires a statutory public meeting.
Right.
So there has to be an open public meeting.
Okay.
So you don't have to be on the agenda. It will be advertised as a public meeting. Sorry. Yeah. But if anybody does reach out to a member, if you do have anything, also let Simon know so we can track those comments, and same as what we did with the official plan. So we had a folder with all of the comments that were in there, so they were all logged and accounted for. So that would be good. The consultant compiled that for us, but it'd be important for us to do that for the zoning as well.
perfect. Any other questions before we get started? Your worship, you think we're ready to roll?
I think so.
All right, I'll turn it over to Simon.
Okay. Yeah, so the purposes of tonight's meeting really is just to kind of open the floor a bit and discuss 4 different areas which we've identified as being key priorities, if you like, that we need to address policies for so that we can better serve the community moving forward. So there's a memo that's been passed to the members of the PAC here, and So the four different bits that we'd really like to talk about tonight would be additional dwelling units, shipping containers, hunt camps, and accessory buildings, structures, and uses. Do you want me to do this presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, so just the background here is that, this is a quick overview of Bonfield Township. So at this point in time, this is for everybody, everyone's at different levels of their understanding of where Bonfield's at. The current official plan for the township was adopted in 2013. A review of the official plan commenced in 2022, as was mentioned. And we're working through some changes to that at the moment. It's currently with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, pending a review. So it was submitted prior to some of the additional changes that have come into effect through the provincial government, including the publication, adoption, if you like, of the new provincial planning statement on the 20th of October. So as I see, there's different policy-based objectives that we now need to kind of integrate into the plan moving forward, which will require us to make some changes, if you like, to the original structure. And then related to this, so building on if you look at like a skeleton, that the official plan is the bones, and the zoning bylaw might be the muscles and tendons and everything that pull it together. That also was originally adopted in 2013. And so until the future of the direction of the official plan is resolved, which this all feeds into in a way, it's all about policy and discussion around these best practices and what's right for Bonfield. That then we'll be able to kind of be a bit more prescriptive in terms of the setbacks and what's, appropriate on any particular lot in different areas of the township. And this all needs to be consistent with an updated, with the updated official plan and the PPS as mentioned, and factoring into any additional acts and regulations which have been going through as well at the same time. So working to develop these solutions, and as mentioned, with there's 4 areas that we want to discuss tonight.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we just go back that other screen?
Sure.
So what, it says this is currently,
With the ministry.
the October 20th, can we get copies of that, or is it quite lengthy?
That's the provincial planning statement that I emailed everybody,
Oh, okay.
So. Yes,
That's
it's
the one
about
you're
50
talking
pages
about.
or so.
You signed up for training?
Yes.
Yes, that's the policy.
Yeah, so there is training, which is obviously closed as that window to take part in that, but the document's available for everybody to read. It's government policy, it's on the website, the provincial planning statement.
Okay, and for the next one, we were just saying that, and until the future direction of the official plan is resolved, a draft replacement bylaw cannot be submitted to MMAH.
Well, I mean, not really, no, because we need to make sure that our official plan is consistent with the priorities of the government. And so once we've got that in place, then we can, build on that.
Okay, so I'm just wondering then the last statement saying to be effective in early 2025, but we won't have the official plan back yet by early 2025.
Right, so the first bylaw that we're referring to is the bylaw where council can adopt the official plan.
Yes,
So because council has not adopted the official plan,
Right.
we know changes will happen. The second one is the zoning. We do the
Yes.
housekeeping zoning bylaw. So
yes,
we can change our zoning bylaw to be more consistent with the PPS, which is what we kind of put forward on these 4 items. So they'll be more consistent with the PPS, and we can do that housekeeping until we can.
so this housekeeping is going to reflect the present OP,
Yes,
not the one we previously worked on.
right, and it will align more with the PPS, the provincial planning statement. So essentially what the provincial planning statement is the province wants to build homes faster.
Yes,
So we have to look at our policies and what's been happening in the past little bit on how that's evolving in Bonfield. So the 4 areas are the things that we need to clean up or to introduce, like the additional residential units, right? The dwelling units. Those are the things so the PPS is, the province has said, as of right, everybody can have 3 units.
yes.
So that'll clean that up.
Yeah, I get that one, but
Okay.
say we're talking, say, seed containers or sheds or that sort of thing. So if we do a bylaw for those now, it's reflective of what's in our present official plan of 2013.
Right.
Not
So,
what we drafted previously.
No, because that has not been adopted yet.
yeah,
So our official plan, our current official plan is not consistent with the PPS.
that's right.
So we can do the zoning bylaw to allow us to do that.
But it doesn't have anything to do with, like sheds don't have anything to do
Not
with the
official
addition. With the additional, but it sounds like you just want to change the bylaws on sheds and sea containers prior to the new official plan coming out.
Right, so the official plan doesn't deal with accessory
No.
units or accessory.
Like
yeah, sorry.
zoning, our
Right.
zoning bylaws.
Yeah, the zoning's for that. So the
So
sheds and the sea containers and stuff, if we have to open up our zoning bylaw to do the additional dwelling units, then we can just open it for everything that we need to resolve.
It won't be in contradiction to
Right.
the current official plan,
Right,
which doesn't go into granular detail on
no,
any of this, right? So
no. So we're just kind of doing it ahead of, you're dealing with some of these instances prior to working on the new zoning bylaw. And so.
We could be 3 years away from a zoning bylaw,
Mhm.
so we need to clean up some of the items that we're having problems with now from our zoning bylaw, and then as well, the additional dwelling units, add them in.
Then you can adjust small
Yeah,
adjustments if you have to.
exactly.
Exactly.
The whole process opens up once we get the official plan and then the zoning.
So it's an evolving process and we're all part of this and we're welcome to everybody's feedback as we go along, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as mentioned, the 4 different areas that we're gonna talk about tonight are the additional residential units, which that's just a collective term, you could say. There's a whole range of different bits in that, as Nikki may have mentioned, whether that's a basement apartment or it's a unit that's bolted onto the back of an existing primary dwelling unit, or maybe it's a carriage house. There's different words in terms of people use for it, but essentially it's that additional unit that you would find on a primary residential lot. We also have shipping containers. We know that they've been quite popular for some people in this township, and so it's time to kind of just refine, really where they should be positioned, what their appearance should be, what the setback should be, and what's appropriate to maintain the character and quality of development within Bondfield. And there's also hunt camps. There's a slight discussion just before this actually that Bondfield as it stands doesn't currently have any approvals in place to allow for hunt camps, and it is recognised that we are a community where that's a pastime or of interest to many people. So there's an opportunity to look at that in this context as well. And then accessory buildings, structures and uses are the other bits that we just mentioned then, stuff that would be used for storage purposes primarily, not habitable structures, but used for, equipment of tools and machinery and whatever that might be. And just to note, that last point. Moving forward, we need to ensure that all proposed dimensions are submitted, including, the lot sizes, building footprints and setbacks, should be displayed in metric format. So traditionally, it was done in acreage, imperial. Now there's been a shift towards hectares, and so that is sometimes, doing these calculations in-house when you receive an application, part of it's done in hectares and part in acres. We need to establish a consistent way to receive that information and process that moving
Still
forward.
exists and I probably still will
It
because
will always exist.
an hectare, okay, it's 1 hectare, but can go down to 1 acre, so.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But just maybe the onus might be on the applicants more moving forward to do those calculations ahead of time and provide us with that information so we can help you. Yeah, next slide, please. In terms of additional dwelling units, now, do we want to use this slide as a backdrop to talk about each of these or finish the presentation and open it up?
Gonna do it one by one?
Yeah, keep that on the screen. Okay, so as you can see, there's a little kind of infographic on the screen here that just alludes to more what I just said then about what an additional dwelling unit is. So you can see of the 4 different kind of areas that we've defined that the first might be, say, a basement apartment. Second one would be, say, if you have a basement apartment, but like an attic conversion or something like that, so long as it meets the building code and access requirements and all the rest. The third one is where you'd say have an additional dwelling unit in the yard with presumably with shared services related to the main dwelling. And the fourth one there is where, say, you've got the primary dwelling, additional basement, and now this allowance for that additional structure within the lot. And just to note that all private services require prior consultation and issuance of a permit by the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority related to the siting and design of proposed septic systems on residential properties. Really important to acknowledge that for habitable structures. And applicants also need to consider the well capacity required to service the property and associated structures. So a range of examples from other Ontario-based communities have been shared with the Planning Advisory Committee here, which was circulated. And maybe we should start that section then. Did people have a chance to have a look at some examples? Have you found any more examples?
Well, you guys start, I'm just gonna let Mike in.
Okay. We can go around in order.
CEO is
Or...
also-
Good evening, Mike. You're able to hear us okay?
He's muted.
Yeah, you can see he's muted.
You're muted.
I know he might have some connection issues, so he might be watching his bandwidth.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
Okay,
As long as he's able to.
we can still see him here. If that won't
Is
go
it
down, so-
possible that we get sent that presentation?
Absolutely.
So sorry, Simon, do you want to back up and
Yeah, so the first of those four topics then, the additional dwelling units, just looking at those four examples there. What we're looking to do is really just start a conversation here as a group, and then we'll feed that into the community as mentioned. But it's just to really talk about what sizes and types units are appropriate, like what are best practice examples, what do we want to see really come forward in the development plan process here in Bonnfield.
Well, I mean, I'll start. I know I've heard from a few different people, like, you know, the scenario based that have recently built a house or purchased a house, and, you know, their parents are getting a little older and they would like their parents to be able to be on their property with them, but not necessarily in the same house. So, you know, building an auxiliary structure, I think right now, you know, there's talk of an adjoining wall and all that kind of stuff, but I think what they're hoping to do is just, you know, a few feet away from the house, talking about using the same septic and well, making sure it has the right capacity, but, you know, that's something that I've heard several people talk about as something that they would like to explore, and I'm sure it happens the reverse when you have, you know, the housing market as expensive as it is. We have parents in existing houses and wanting their kids to perhaps not be under the same roof, but be able to support them by, you know, having an auxiliary dwelling unit, so.
After the parents leave or kids leave, that's what happens then. You just rental unit.
Yeah, it could be for sure.
Yeah, because I know the La Riviere is on Grand Desire Road. Parents had their house and the son was, and his family was in another house. I don't know if it was, now it's two different, I don't know if the lot's separated or not. I don't know what happened there.
Well, I guess it should have been separated if.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how
Yeah,
it
it
should have
started
been, yeah.
off that way, I think on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same lot, or maybe it was separated, I don't know, but
Hmm.
that's the only example that I know of.
So currently in our policies, secondary dwellings are permitted, but there has to be an adjoining wall. So it can be in your basement or an addition on your house and one whole wall is against your house. So
It's one building.
So these will, like as Simon was saying, these new policies from the provincial legislation will allow you to have like a basement apartment, your main apartment, maybe an apartment on your garage loft, and then that standalone secondary dwelling. That would be a way, but again, there's requirements that under the building code, we can't like ignore, like they have to be in there, so there has to be the well capacity to make sure that there's enough water for all of the units. And as well, that there has to be sign off from the North Bay Mattawa Conservation to make sure that the septic can actually accommodate and that the property can accommodate the septic that would be required. When a septic's built, it's generally built to what the house is built for, 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. So then it means that someone would have to change their septic in order to have that additional. So in a hamlet property, that it's gonna, right there, we'll just say what the dwelling unit, like the detached dwelling unit might be. But those are things that will be beyond our control. We really don't have a say on that.
Because there could be cases like, we'll take yourself, you've got, you know, a child that decides to move out and be on their own. The capacity hasn't really changed because it's the same number of people. It hasn't changed any.
It's not on the number of people, it's the number of fixtures.
Yeah,
So if you have a house with 3 fixtures and you're at capacity, then that septic will not accommodate another build unless you maybe take away a one washroom and then add it to the, you know, give one up in the house and give it to the auxiliary building. That way you can basically be at capacity. But then you still wouldn't be at capacity because that's only your washroom, but you have a kitchen, you have wastewater, and then you also are required to have laundry on site. You can't have shared laundry though. So
Mhm.
that's another thing, right?
yeah. Or maybe it's compulsory to have laundry on site
Yes, it is.
In a dwelling.
in a dwelling? Okay, because some apartments don't have laundry on site.
Yeah, but for additional.
For
dwelling
this,
units, I see
yeah.
examples in here that they said that laundry has to be a part of that
Mhm.
for it to,
The primary would have to have its own laundry.
yeah.
But I don't know that I've seen where it's regulated through the provincial act yet, that laundry is required, and that might be a question that the CBO might have to look into.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Figure out if laundry is required for a secondary. But septics are generally not based on people, they are based on the structure.
right, but then that could qualify for almost everybody, so maybe we can look into that more. You know, where they are allowing a secondary dwelling, like then almost every place would have to be renovated to either take out a washroom or something, so maybe we could, you know, have that looked into to see what happens, because then almost everyone would need another septic.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah, that will be required, that will likely be the requirement.
I'm just wondering if they made some sort of concession for that. You know, when they were thinking about an additional dwelling.
The legislation was geared towards the province-wide, right? So some
Yeah.
municipalities have the main systems as
Yeah.
opposed to rural. So
Yeah.
yeah, there might be additional costs for rural communities or
Yeah,
households.
If you're
Yeah.
on private services, that won't be something that we can say you don't have to have a new septic, we don't get to regulate.
no,
septic.
I'm aware of that, but I'm just wondering to ask if is there some concession for rural properties?
We can look into it.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the nice part about the Northwood Meadow Conservation Authority, they will also determine capacity of existing.
Yeah,
And if it doesn't meet, if they're saying, yeah, it doesn't have enough capacity, well, then unfortunately, it's gonna come at additional cost to upgrade your system, replace it, put a second one in, whatever you need to do.
yeah, remove something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so for us, we would really kind of need to know that for
Mhm.
our area.
Like for the hamlet, it's not too practical, like the room is limited. like,
Well, and I
very
think-
small lots, like, so
Yeah.
that's what I
think-
was thinking, maybe going up, but not sideways or
Right.
in the backyard.
No,
I don't see it happening, but
I think that will be what dictates the size of the additional dwelling unit in a hamlet. And the rural property, you can accommodate a much bigger septic
Yeah.
than on these smaller lots.
there's people are buying.
Speaking to the size, I think I've seen in one of the examples that they're allowing additional dwelling units to be standalone. However, they cannot exceed 40% of the footprint of the primary build, right? So
Mhm.
you can only go down in size.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's more examples that you guys want to get into, so that is absolutely a really good conversation. We debated that amongst ourselves, and so if you're a young couple, so just to counter that, if you're a young couple, then this is all about brainstorming and kind of getting all of the scenarios together. If you're a young couple, you can only afford, to build a 1,200 home. And then
Mike's trying to get anything.
So if you're a young couple, 1,200 square foot home, and then now you're, 20 years later, you have more kids, but now your family, your parents want to move onto the property. If you say only 40%, then that means that they can only build an 800 square foot home. Whereas now they can afford to build a much bigger home. So do you limit that? Or is it just based on what you can fit on the property?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think a lot of the time, these municipalities are limited, and so they're using it as an example, like, okay, most of our lots don't exceed 1 hectare and or maybe a bit more, right? But you might get into an area where it doesn't matter if it's 40%, you still won't fit it. So
Correct.
you're done there. So really, it's a game of numbers for the people that have lots, right? Like, I mean, urban lots, right? Rural is a different story because you can have 200 acres and then you say, yeah, you can have 2 additional standalone units, but we need them to be within 300 yards of the current one because we don't want you to put it on the other side.
Absolutely.
Because we also don't, like, you have to share the same driveway. That's the other thing, right? So you can't come off 2
That would
different
be a
driveways
policy
off
that
the
we
road
take.
because MTO would have a problem with that. So, like, I don't know, I think it's a game of like, it's not like you can't just blanket and say, this is what we're gonna do. I think it's gonna be like, what are the numbers? What works for us, right? Like, because someone in the country is gonna say, I have 10 acres and why am I gonna have to build a 40%, like 40% footprint? And what about the third unit? Does it have to be 40%? Or now do I have to even step down more? Or is it gonna be that if you do 2, they both can be 40% or less, but one can be 50, you know what I mean? Like it gets to the point, but when you are in town and then you're like, well, I can't even do 40, then the end of conversation, right? Like you're, it's not gonna happen.
I think for the rule, for the hamlets, they are going to be a case by case.
Yeah,
Like we can set some policy, set some rule, and then I think it's just gonna be a case by case when somebody comes in. But all those questions that you're asking for the rule and how that works, that's exactly why we're here.
yeah.
So what would you see? What do you think is appropriate?
Well, based on the provincial policy, they are accepting. I saw all your orientations there. One is missing. The third one should, in my opinion, should have a second blue house on it, indicating that you have a primary with 2 additional ADUs, right? Because you have 3 on the last one and 3 on the second one,
Right.
and you're allowed to have 3. Now, the question comes into play again, North Bay Matter Conservation Authority, can you do an additional septic for all 3? Or, it may be, right? I mean, like we have townhouses that are sharing septics, maybe not all of them, but, or you can say you want your 2 blue houses to have their same system, right? And that same system will have the shared laundry and all that, right, for requirements. So, yeah.
Like there's still a lot of unknowns. So it'd be nice if we could put what we do know.
Mhm.
And like right now, we know septic and wells are gonna be an issue. For rural, because we're talking our areas, we don't have water and sewer, so.
I think, I wanna, I'm not trying to be the reverse here, but I think those are the knowns, not the unknowns. We know that you require a water source and you know that you require a septic. It's just a matter of
I know that,
the
but
numbers, right? So
yeah,
that's
and
not-
what's allowable in the rural.
Well, that's all based on capacity, right? Because if someone wants to build a 40% footprint and he wants to put 3 washrooms in there, not that it's gonna happen, but then you're gonna say, well, you need a class 4 septic with, that much coverage. And you have a treed lot or you have a rock lot. It's based on,
Oh, no, just what you mentioned, you said, what would they allow one septic system to service the 3?
oh, I'm sure they would if you have the land for it, right? But
Yeah, the
so
capacity, yeah.
well, what I'm saying is that, yeah, the unknown is what you have, like as you're the landowner. It's up to you to find out what you can do. So that's not the question I'm trying to answer. I'm just saying that we know that those are factors that are telling you can or you can't right now, right? Like, so you need potable water.
Yeah.
Because some of these actually went as far as saying that they need a hydro, whatever long word,
Hydrogeological
Yeah.
assessment,
yeah, basically study, right?
work out the groundwater levels.
Basically, right?
capacity,
Yeah, and you don't really need that to build a house, cause they just punch a well and you're set, right?
Mhm.
So then, do we wanna request that? I don't know if we do, I don't,
Well,
we
Under
can-
the Ministry of Environment, once it's over 10,000 liter capacity. Well, not necessarily the Conservation Authority, then you have to go to the ministry, right? Once it's over 10,000 liters, so that would determine what size of a septic system you'd have to put in there.
Mhm.
On the, as far as I know, is that as long as it's not over the 10,000 liters, then it would be the Conservation Authority.
yeah, maybe we could just ask Mike, is it likely that if you had 3 additional dwelling units on top of a primary unit, that it would come close to 10,000 liters of?
I'm not, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm not sure about the flow. The one thing that I heard you mention before and I was muted is, every unit must have their own laundry facility.
Okay,
Okay,
where is that from?
That's from the Ontario Building Code.
Okay, cause, when I seen it, earlier, yesterday, it said that, I think it was Kitchener. You can have a shared facility for 2 units.
Shared facility for 2 units, I'd have to look into it, but if, that shared, I've seen shared units, shared laundry facilities, and then that creates another suite that has to be fire rated, but, from what I see, I'll look into it, but from what I see, every secondary dwelling must have a laundry facility, because it's its own dwelling, right?
Yeah, the way I read it though, it must have access to its own laundry facility on site and it can be shared.
Okay, let me look into that.
Well,
That's,
so it could be that, 2 adjoining units, or if you have, for example, if you have one independent house, like. If you have the primary house with a basement apartment, then the primary and the basement can share the same facility. Whereas the outbuilding can have its own. So that's a scenario where there's only 2 laundries for 3 units.
sure, yeah, it gets complicated at that point, because then you need, fire rated doors from both units and fire rated access to it. And then that room has to be rated from both occupants, but yeah, I've seen it done before, but it gets very expensive and complicated, but
I think what is good from our perspective is, I mean, the questions about the wells, the questions about the septics really are out of our hands. I mean, it's really like, we get to say you can have 3 units, but if your lot doesn't allow it, well, then sorry, that's not us saying no, that's Conservation Authority saying you don't have the capacity for it, right? So I think what we have to do is be prepared. What is if all of the scenario works out great, they put in an extra sized capacity septic system, or they're willing to put in a second, whatever. What do we see allowing on a lot?
We
So
can't
that-
allow a building permit until the septic's, we can't issue the building
Correct.
permit till the septic site, the
Exactly.
septic is approved,
So I
right?
think if we move past that and say, okay, they've crossed all those barriers, then they're all ready to go. What do we see allowing in our municipality?
I like that approach.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna be, it doesn't matter, if they're approved by, North Bay Conservation Authority, if they're approved for that, if they have potable water, check. Down the list is where we come in, and then let's figure that part out.
Yeah.
Like, for example, is there gonna be the same number, are we sticking to 45%, 40%, 50%, for an independent house, and is it gonna be repeated for the second, house? Or do we say, hey, based on this lot, if you have more than X amount of acres, you can go 60%, 40%. But the 2 other ones can't exceed 100, so like, what, as a municipality, are you guys willing to?
And I wonder if we reframe that and think of, I know sometimes we'll think of 10 or 50 acre lots and it's not really applicable, but really, if we think of lot coverage. So let's say you have an acre. Well, and you already have a 1,200-foot house on there and you're gonna put another 2 1,200-foot houses. We've pretty much filled an acre. And now let's talk about how much are we allowing like per acre, per, like what's that coverage, right? So
Yeah,
won't be applicable if you have 10 acres, chances are you're not gonna come anywhere close, but we don't wanna make sure, my opinion, is we wanna make sure that we're not gonna get 3 dwellings so jam-packed on a small lot that, you know, setbacks are now issues and they're coming from minor variances and they're.
Plus your garage, plus your shed,
Right.
plus your snowmobile.
because you're
Yeah.
required parking, right?
Right,
Yes.
Right.
So currently it's a 40% lot coverage.
right,
And that's why the carriage
And that
house
includes
format is popular, isn't it? Because you're integrating a garage structure with an apartment above, just saving on space and lot coverage.
Think we heard that the PPS, forgive us, because it's just a couple weeks old, so we're all still learning it. But I think we heard that it cannot be more or more than 45% lot coverage.
That's right, yeah, that's what we heard.
Yes.
Oh, the additional dwelling,
All
Total.
buildings.
total,
The
For the
total
property.
lot coverage.
It's like
We-
Jason said, if it's a
with the house.
huge property, it's not gonna really matter, but like when we get into some of those smaller ones that have only maybe been subdivided at some point, then. it's definitely gonna be-
Is that all buildings?
All livable structures.
Yeah.
Livable.
Well,
Oh, I think-
I don't think a shed would count.
No.
Mike, do sheds and garages, accessory uses count in lot coverage?
Garage.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a planning question.
Well, I say yes.
I would say
Right.
anything that probably required a permit should. You put up a little
Yeah.
rinky-dink plastic shed, probably doesn't count, right?
No, I wouldn't count it because it's not considered a building.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah, I think anything that would require a permit would make sense to me that it would be. I think.
So if we went by lot coverage, that's not percentage of the primary, but lot coverage, it can't be more than 45%.
Right,
Fair.
so
Right
do
now,
we-
we're 40.
So do we need to concern ourselves with, so let's say somebody has a 1,200, will you square foot home? Do we care if somebody wants to build another 1,200 square foot home? Like, does that take away a character that we're concerned about, or? Cause I get it if somebody builds 5,800 square foot home or a 10,000 square foot home and you want two 10,000 square foot
Well, they-
homes, I get.
They
the
could just
problem.
shuffle it and say, we're gonna build a bigger primary and this will be the second.
This will be 40%.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they could, for sure. But does
As
it
long as
matter?
our policies allow that.
Right,
Right,
but does it matter if it's two 1,200 square foot?
yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, because there could be incidences where there's a little shack that. They didn't know what to do with it, it's part of the family, and they said, now we're ready for it, let's build a big house and then keep the lot in the family. So,
Yeah, so I think. Yeah,
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question then. So say if that other dwelling that was built 60 years ago, and you say, okay, this is gonna now be the auxiliary and we're getting a building permit
Mhm.
for a new house, so does the building inspector come in and inspect all that dwelling?
No,
the existing, no.
No,
The,
unless
the
they're
one
making-
that's
not
gonna
unless
become
they're
the
making-
auxiliary?
Not unless they're making renovations.
Okay, so if they came and we had a building permit for a new house, they don't touch the one that we're making the auxiliary?
unless you connect to it, then he's gonna inspect it,
Yeah,
things like that, right, but no.
In general, no. There would have to be something that would trigger that.
like.
We would make sure there was a permit for it, just make sure that it's permitted.
Back 45, 50.
Well, what
years.
happens if it's 40 year, back 45 and you just can't find the permit?
Well, that happens.
Yeah, so you take it out on,
Yeah, but in general, there has to be something that triggers that.
okay,
Yeah, so generally it would just be a life safety component. Let's say you have no smoke detectors in the house, which you must have, or there's no handrails or guards on the side of a deck, which you've always have to have had, right? Other than that, you're not obligated to comply with the code, except for if you're attaching an addition, then of course there's fire separations and fire rated doors that'll have to be brought in to that existing home, right? To separate the units.
and that's then also if it becomes a basement apartment.
Yes, basement apartment, yes, there's part of the codes because you're attaching a secondary suite to an existing one, right? So there's fire ratings that have to take place that have to be put into place into the existing home.
Any other questions, thoughts on this one? Or do you want to move on to the next topic?
Do you need
or-
anything else from us on this? Any other?
Well, we
kind of
need more of
things?
a time, but I think like, I guess, yeah, what would then be the next steps specific to ADUs, like. Having seen some of the information that was sent across, if you feel there's particular best practice examples that you feel we could translate across, you could highlight them and send them to us, or.
Yeah.
Drop your thoughts in an email.
I just wanna add one more thing to this category, because, you know, what's becoming popular is, you know, obviously it's now coming into code, tiny homes, right?
That's what I was
And
gonna bring
then
up.
it's, obviously, I don't wanna, it's gonna be a part of this, right? If people bring in tiny homes, then, they're basically just, they can put them anywhere they want, type thing, and then again, you know, as long as they keep within the 3 lot coverage, I'm pretty sure those are gonna be smaller, but people have to understand it's a 2 permit system, right? If you get them prefabbed somewhere else, they still have to get inspected in the factory and then shipped to site, which that inspector is gonna have to, you know, check that. But are we putting that into this conversation, or is that a complete separate thing?
Lots of debates about tiny homes too.
Yeah, and interest in fairness, people are,
Yeah.
they're
Absolutely.
asking everywhere about it, you
Yeah.
know.
So we were at a session about planning and we had this discussion internally lots too. So the building code says that a minimum unit is 188 square feet, right, Mike?
17.
Close, 178.
Darn. But then when we were at training last week, someone was asking, well, what is a tiny home? So we've come back to, if someone asks us about tiny homes, and we're asking them, tell us about your tiny home. So yes, because we don't allow mobile homes, so it can't be on wheels, it has to be on a foundation, has to be set in. Those are our rules right now. So right now, it's no, like we don't allow tiny homes. Because they come on mobile, we don't do that.
Well, not necessarily, like you can stick frame a tiny home now, right? And
Yeah.
it's never had a trailer frame, it's actually just a home that's really
Just
small,
small
but
dwelling unit.
and it's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's between 17.5 square meters and 37 square meters, right? So it's
So we
basically
don't
just compact.
permit them right now, but the ADUs will allow permit.
Yeah, so I was wondering if that's gonna be
Our
a
minimum
part of
square,
this conversation.
our minimum square footage for our cottage is 400. 450 square
I
feet?
think that's on
Thought
the
it
next
was-
slide.
Four- 400 and 800 for a house.
Yeah, 807 for a house, but how much did you say for a cottage?
I think it's 400, eh?
Yeah, I think it's 400 or 450, it's definitely a 4.
I'm
Next
guessing that'll have to change.
It is in your materials that you guys have tonight. Yeah, so
I thought
we
it
have
was
not considered,
900
we
for-
haven't considered changing those numbers yet. But an additional dwelling unit will be less than the 400 square feet, so it has to be factored in.
Right, so, and then that's the question, so. I personally have no problem with an ADU being built as a tiny home, being built, like, I'm fine with that. Does it make sense that we allow that as a primary dwelling? On the property, so somebody's gonna build a 400 square foot home. And that's the primary dwelling, or do we stick with a minimum size home based on? Part of it's in the building code, right? Like there's certain size for kitchens and all that, right?
Yeah, the minimum size is 178, and that generally is combined spaces, right? So you can reduce the footprint. But
Oh,
178 is the minimum, bare bones.
178 is in the building code for a dwelling?
A livable dwelling.
For a
unit.
dwelling, yeah.
So the primary one would need to be at least double that to achieve, for that to be, say, 40% of the size, right?
Right.
Says building code, though, it says 178, and then our rules, like municipalities then get to set their own in their zoning bylaw, what the buildings are. So ours is the 400 and the 807,
Yeah.
which seem very consistent with like a lot of the other bylaws that are there.
I know, friends of my sister, they have a vacant lot and they were permitted to put a tiny home on it. And so, they go and enjoy it and And,
Is it their primary residence?
it's their,
Summer
secondary,
home?
well, they go all year.
Like their cottage?
And is it a recreational, what's the classification, not recreational? Like if it's
The
cottage, it's
zoning?
called, yeah.
Seasonal dwelling?
It's not their primary, it would be their. Like a cottage or a seasonal dwelling, thank you, jeez.
Yeah.
Where were you in a second? I was
But
like,
I'm-
back in the brain. Yeah,
I don't know if they would be, stopped to use it, year round. I don't.
It would be
have that
interesting to know if
knowledge.
they got it as a seasonal dwelling or if it's their full-time. Like if they could use it, because seasonal could be, they use it in the winter too, it's just you can't stay there every night of the year, right?
And do you know how big it is?
No, but it's a cute tiny home.
Yeah.
I know, I really
You're
like
fine.
live in something like that. Then I put on this hat and I'm like, no.
Yeah, well, and that's, so, like, so.
Well,
I-
but I'm just saying that it is being allowed in some townships, and so my question to you, with this hat, why not?
I can answer that, so.
Yes.
The challenge, because I am torn on this, because I love this, I could live in a tiny home, no problem, I think they're great. The challenge when I sit in this hat is, if we have a municipality filled with tiny homes with an assessment of next to nothing. The taxes are gonna be outrageous for everybody else who doesn't have a tiny home, right? So that's the fine balance between, it's fine in my opinion, if, okay, like if it's seasonal, I get it, like you don't need, like. If that's fine, because there's not that many seasonal secondary homes that people have or use. But if it's their primary, that, it's a tricky one for me, because you get, if you walk that through.
Mhm.
But realistically, it's not like you're gonna get everybody, it's only certain people that would wanna live in a home that small, like really the percentage at the end of the day
Yeah,
would probably
But
be.
The ones who
Given the cost
allow
of
it,
living inflation, like, you know, like there's more demand, people are downsizing, so it's
Yeah.
possible that the floodgates
Well,
are
then-
open and you'd have the same problem that
Yeah.
Jason's mentioned.
Yeah, but the world is changing, just exactly what you're
Yeah.
saying, people
That's
can't
right.
afford,
But it might,
people can't afford.
and I'm not sure that should maybe be a whole of a meeting with Pat, get some state talks specifically about that, 'cause that's
Yeah.
about just the accessory dwelling units, and I see that as a primary dwelling unit,
Yeah.
even though it's a smaller dwelling unit. And one idea that we floated, again, this, we're creating policy and nothing's being decided at all to the audience.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's potential to have several tiny homes on one large lot with shared services, and then you get everyone gets the benefit of realizing, you know, a communal shared space, increased value of the property, equivalent to a country subdivision in a way, but you know, for
Mhm.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of this exercise.
Yeah.
Is to make additional homes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
to bring additional living quarters for people that, and I think if I had nothing
absolutely.
and I had a little home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I could move into that little home pretty quick.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
But
think,
it should be limited to a certain size lot, like under 25 acres and 50 acres, so that
Yeah.
the larger lots not being used up for a small amount of time.
So that we're balancing.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of people that, can't afford to say, build or like on a recreational property. That, you know, maybe that's all they can afford for now is to build a 500 square foot home.
I don't think that would apply because, the ADUs are typically for either for family, you know, or for rentals, because you
Yes, but
I can't come to you and say, can I build a tiny home on your house? It's gonna be your house on your lot, right? It's
yeah,
gonna be your house.
or I could, if I wasn't gonna live there, I could rent it, but we're talking about also another big thing is affordable housing as well. Not just additional
Oh, absolutely.
dwellings.
But I'm just
Yeah,
saying that.
so I'm
you
just talking
can't-
about
you can't
affordable
just-
housing.
Yeah, but. Those additional units have to be kind of like, it's either gonna be the owner that's gonna be building it.
Yeah.
Or the owner's familiar.
This is just a sub off of
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
all
you're-
thought housing.
But that
Yeah.
affordability does come in through the additional dwelling unit. So if I have my house and in my backyard, I put in the additional dwelling unit, it's going to be smaller, it's going to be more affordable, or I would build it smaller and more affordable.
Mhm.
And then that would be giving us the attainable housing and we would have more rentals and more population in Bonneville.
Okay, we
Yeah.
would still do that. I'm gonna take somebody that just subdivided lots for their children.
Which happens.
They have a lot,
Mhm.
but they can't afford to do a house to the standard.
800 square feet.
Yeah, to 800 square feet.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make, so in that scenario, that would, you're still getting some more income because they're putting in, a septic and a well and everything, and a small home for a young couple to live in.
But that's what we call the 800 square foot. So I have someone who is their early 20s, they can't afford much, so they built 810 square feet, because that was all it's under $160,000.
Which,
Yeah.
let's be clear, an 8
Yeah.
by, like, is what, 8 by 10 is 800 square feet?
No.
No, that's 80 square
No,
feet,
that's
8
80.
by, yeah.
But
Let me do some math here.
But
So
some
it's 80
townships are allowing even less. Some townships are,
Yeah.
that's all I'm saying.
Some
That-
are.
But to your
because-
point, there's a grey area there around
Yeah.
kind of, if the property has been set up, then there's some kind of benefit there, there's additional tax revenue
Yeah.
coming in, and there's also, so, maybe there's a maximum lot size for tiny homes.
Right, because, and I see where that would make sense, because you're like, okay, I'm gonna invest and I'm gonna build my home as a young person. And if I built it on my parents' lot and my parents sell the property, well, my house goes with it unless
Yeah.
it's separated
Mhm.
on a different lot, right? So it's the same thing.
But-
If I went to Cam's
I
and
don't think
said,
it's allowed to be separated. That's the,
That's on the.
Right.
yeah, so I think ADUs are classified that it has to remain with the original lot. It
Yeah,
cannot be
absolutely.
severed in the
Yeah.
future, so.
100%, I think what, just going back to Gina's point where she said, if
It's
it was
already
separate,
subject,
Yeah.
yeah.
right, because if it didn't happen before,
Mm.
like, and then the kids built a house on it or whatever. It didn't happen prior to the ADU being
Yeah.
built. Yeah,
And then
you're-
when they're 40, they can afford it. They build a bigger home and they have the little one as their ADU.
They'll probably just switch.
So it's
So
important
just
to realize that
Size,
all the buildings on the property must be under one ownership. And there's
Yeah.
a couple factors for that. I'll give you an example. If you're sharing a well, you're allowed to share a well between buildings on the same property. Should you divide that property, the well can no longer be shared between two properties. Water line, water service cannot cross property line except from the city water, some type public purveyor, right?
Same thing with the septic, I guess.
Same thing.
And that's why it's not, that's why they're not allowing the severances.
Yeah.
So but I think the
question-
tiny home as a separate entity on a separate lot is different than what the ADUs are.
Yeah.
yes, I
Another
understand that.
subject.
Yeah,
I'm just talking about, possibly, in the zoning for a lot, talking about not an ADU, just
Yeah,
a smaller size.
And
we have to address it.
I like the idea of tiny homes, I really do. We can't be too far ahead of the curve that we get every tiny home builder coming to Bonfield because they're not permitted in 90% of the province. I think if there's a concerted effort between, like, if everybody starts allowing it, then yeah, we'll get our fair share of them, but it won't be the onslaught of, I'm moving to Bonfield because they allow tiny homes and
Oh,
nowhere
West
else does,
Nipissing's
right?
considering a North Bay, so they're gonna be,
Yeah,
North Bay is getting one, like we were talking, like in the communal.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Sure, the buildings in North Bay.
Pardon me, on Lake Shore. Oh, yeah, down Lake Shore.
Yeah.
Two tiny homes per lot, and they are quite small lots in fairness, but
Mhm.
it is in that kind of touristy area, and so I
Mhm.
suspect there'll be a mix of.
And they have municipal services.
Yeah,
Yes,
that
yes.
big
So it's-
difference.
Yeah.
It's not the same thing at all.
Yeah,
So for ADUs, do we see that 3 are acceptable, 2 in a house or 2, like 1 outside or 1 inside, 2 outside, like the
Do we
garage
care the
loft?
makeup of 3?
No,
Yeah,
As long as it's not all 3 in one building, right, Mike?
Yeah, so as soon as you go more than 2 in a building, it comes out of the classification of a house and it's then into a small building. And small building has implications for limiting distance, There's a lot of complications for fire separations. That would be the first time that I see that you're allowed 3 in a building. Perhaps the province has made that exception now, but it complicates things. So it becomes difficult as for a building code standpoint.
So what do we see in example 2 there? Is that not 3 in 1?
Right, so those ones came from Kitchener, so they have done it. We're wondering. What do they do? So then we've looked at.
CBO might not be involved in that, fair enough.
So-
Well, it's not that it's impossible. It complicates things quite a bit. So, but
And when does it become a multi-residential zoning versus,
And 3 units,
right, at 3 units like that, right?
yeah, 3 units, multi-res.
I guess at 4 is.
Good questions.
Yeah, so I'm fine with 1 additional in the house and 1 separate. I'm fine with 2 separate. Plus that's my opinion, but I mean, speak up. Quite frankly, if the provincial legislation allows 3 in the same dwelling, well, fine by me too. I guess we wouldn't really have a choice if the provincial government is saying this is permitted.
Well, don't forget coverage was discussed, right? So if you have the primary and then you're allowed an additional 2 additional dwelling units but you stack them and the coverage doesn't exceed 40%, now you have 2 buildings, but 3 units,
Right.
right? Because now you have one on the side that's smaller than your first one, but it's stacked.
Well, and I think it's just gonna legalize many apartments that are already happening within people's homes.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Yeah,
Just have to get the permits though.
yeah.
So maximum of 3 and whatever combination.
Yeah.
Or whatever,
Logic.
whatever's allowed with the provincial government.
Right.
Now, the other thing is where.
I mean, when you look at the township, like there's areas that we've been looking at, you know, in terms of the strategic big picture, like, you know, the northern aspects of it are better connected in terms of Highway 17, proximity to the hamlets, to services, just basic things that you need in life. So I think the further that you go south, the less accessible you are in planning terms. I mean, these are best practices that are usually applied. So it's not that we just draw a line and say beyond certain road, this is not acceptable, but there might be other factors related to individual sites. That's why I always prefer the site-specific approach, because if there's development constraints that are occurring on that, and it's just going to result, like, you know, in too much dense form of development on certain properties, then maybe it's not appropriate for other reasons, character and etc. You know, or the impact on the environment around it. So I can't give an answer now.
Are you essentially saying anywhere that the property, that it will work on a property?
Yeah,
So any zone?
I mean, that it's possible that we could do that for sure if you feel. I mean, I take direction from council too, as well as everybody's advice. Like, I'll enforce the rules if you like, but or Mike will.
What zone would it not work in?
Obviously there's issues related to kind of agriculture, minimum distance separation and stuff. So that's why I say there's factors that might impact, like other zones might impact property more than the zone itself within which the property is located, if that makes sense. Or its proximity to aggregate sites. Again, the province said through the provincial planning statements that, you know, where the property has potential future expansion, that, you know, development should not in some way inhibit that. And the closer that you bring residential units to these sources of resource extraction and economic activity, then you know, that's not a tick in the box, let's say. Yeah, so again, there's more site-specific approach, but I can certainly see them in rural and urban. Obviously the urban areas themselves are limited in terms of the space, as was mentioned, so it might that's why going to the kind of minimum or maximum lot size might provide a framework within which, almost like anybody that's looking to see could this be achieved, they kind of work the way through like each of those layers to understand it. Does that make sense? Okay.
So more or less, the government hasn't restricted any zones.
Not from what I've seen. I mean, obviously, you know, if there's hazardous zones
Oh,
or
yeah.
that kind of,
I mean, the
you know,
norm.
nuclear sites or
Yeah.
whatever, like, yes, but like, I didn't see anything too prescriptive. No, it is about creating more flexibility at the same time as maintaining ability to have economic activity and movement corridors. So that involves both, provincial highways, stuff like pipelines and other.
So recreational everywhere, the hamlets.
Well, I mean, some of the challenges with the recreational areas is lake capacity. So if we're advised by kind of North Bay Mountain Conservation Authority or any other agency that,
But if they
no-
have no restrictions, then why would we, correct? Why would we want to put restrictions if North Carolina?
Yeah, we work closely with them and we're not gonna defer out of some, step in and purposely decide
Like we have
against something.
setbacks, right? So there's
Yes.
already prescribed setbacks that
Yeah.
we get dictated, so there's,
Yes.
so if
Yeah.
you're close to a certain provincial significant wetland, you can't build anything as much. And we have, I would say, several properties that are properties, but are not buildable properties because of all of those setbacks, right? So they're in the official plan, but we don't have extra setbacks from other than what we've been.
So that brings up a good question. So municipalities can get instructed that like to limit building on a lake. If a lake is at capacity,
You can't, there's no more.
you can't,
permits.
right, you can't, no permits. So that would include if the lake is at capacity, like every additional dwelling unit would add pressure to that lake. And if you hit capacity, that actually might take away some potential other development. Like somebody might be like, I have 3 acres on waterfront. And I can't build because the lake's at
No, you
capacity
can
because
still get a building permit on a lot.
not if it's at capacity, yeah, not if the lake's at
I
capacity.
think what she's referring to is if there's an empty lot that's existing.
It, and
empty,
existing,
Then that's factored.
Oh, it's
in,
Yes,
factored,
yeah,
yes,
that's what
sorry,
I'm
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about.
sorry, yeah, it's factored, but
But,
thank you.
but I see your point. I think it's
Yeah.
at capacity because of the fact that every lot has a septic.
right,
And every lot is, this many acres, and so they understand that you're adding to that, right? So.
yeah.
My parting words, the next subject of shipping containers. I believe a shipping container ceases to be one, once it's put on a lot, it becomes a prefabricated accessory building.
Mhm.
That's what it should be referenced as,
Okay,
so, and all the rules that go with that.
could be a good way
Yeah.
to characterize it.
I don't know
Or
what
put
you're gonna
bracket
talk
C
about.
containers, so.
No, no, I think
My
that-
right is here.
That'll be the starting point for sure. We'll start with that point. That's a fair point. to make.
Yeah.
My parting points.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay,
Thanks,
next
Mark.
line.
Thank you.
Okay, that was really good. Yes, the next slide, please. Shipping containers or prefabricated structures on a. Okay, so the newly introduced Ontario Building Code 2024 allows a storage building of 161 square feet without a permit. So for anyone watching at home, that roughly equates to an 8 feet by 20 feet container. So anything larger than that would require you to contact Mike and or myself and just determine, where's it gonna go.
So is there like a bylaw that presently enforces that?
That's-
Or
Zoning.
what's there that's enforcing what you just said?
Oh, it's the Ontario Building Code that enforces the storage. So the Ontario Building Code just increased in 2024. You used to be able to build an 8 by 10.
Yes, yeah,
And now you can build the, roughly 8 by 20, 161 square feet. So that's building code. Accessory structures are under our zoning bylaw. So we're seeing more and more shipping containers coming into the municipality. They're making modifications to the shipping container or the 40-foot containers. And the 40-foot containers, Mike will correct me, I do believe that they are considered buildings and they do need permits. Under the building code, and those things just aren't happening, so.
yeah. I'm just wanting to know, so what code talks specifically to shipping containers are considered a building?
Beyond 161 square feet.
Mike, like that one?
I don't know if you
Hi.
muted Mike.
What
I'm just
constitutes a building?
Sorting out his camera.
You're on mute
He's
too.
muted again.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yep,
yeah.
That's
Hi.
great, thanks.
Now we can.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Shipping container is not defined in the building code, but the area of the structure is defined as a building under the Ontario Building Code Act.
But defined in. Sorry, what act?
Building code.
2024.
Oh, sorry.
You said not defined in the Building Code Act,
So shipping container is not defined,
in the
But
Building Code Act.
but the area of a shipping container, 8 by 40 feet, is defined as a structure and is defined as a building in the Ontario Building Code Act. Therefore, a building permit is required.
So it might not say, does it say the word shipping container? It might not say the word shipping container,
No.
but what it says is anything above a certain size, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah,
Would include a shipping container.
yeah. Shipping container is not mentioned.
Right.
So what, you have to get a building permit for that?
Yes, correct. If it's over the 161.4 square feet, yes.
So that's not something that's necessarily permanent, right?
If it's brought onto the property, it's a building, you need a building permit.
Once it's on the property, you have to get a building permit for it. And if
Yes.
you remove it, it's not a permanent structure. I'm just wondering, would you pay for a building, the same fees for the building permit if you had something permanent on there?
Well, the time that the building spends on the property is not really dictated in the code. If you're bringing a building onto the property, you need a building permit. We do see sometimes where shipping containers are brought onto the property in a temporary fashion. Perhaps somebody sold their house and they want to load their belongings into the shipping container and move them fairly rapidly. Then no, we wouldn't ask. We would work with them, and we could enter into some type of agreement that they would remove the container before a certain date. But generally, if you're bringing it on the property, you would need a permit.
So you would have the ability, I'm not looking for workarounds, but if somebody wanted to bring in 2 8 by 20 containers and sit them side by side, there's no permit required.
No.
Right.
If you're creating one structure with 2 of them, yes. Or
Right.
as we often see, we'll see 2 shipping containers spread apart by maybe 10 feet, and then there's types Quonset hut put up on top of them. Then the entire area of those 3 buildings together would put you over the 161. So you would need a permit for that.
But if they weren't touching, if they're a foot apart but not touching, nothing connecting them.
In the building code, no. What you'll find in many municipalities, some municipalities have a distance of how close accessory buildings could be to primary buildings or to other buildings, and
Yeah,
that covers that, eh?
I think, is ours 3 feet?
6.
Mm,
Oh, it might be 6. We'll have to look into that.
yeah, and it might just be to the primary building, right?
Yeah, I have to look at the wording.
So, okay, if we were to hone this conversation in a bit and we were to say, somebody's gonna put a shipping container, whether it's, they need a permit or not, because they're based on size. What criteria do we think, would be beneficial for the, community? Like from a setback perspective or the general look and feel of a shipping container? Some say they have to be sided, some say that they have to, I haven't, but I'm happy to hear from the group as well.
I mean, it at least needs to meet the building code standards, but yeah.
Right.
These are the provisions for the zone.
So, I'll start the conversation. I think, let's say if I brought in an 8 by 20 shipping container, I put it somewhere on my property, no permit required. But I would say that it would still need to, and the municipality should say, I don't think it necessarily needs to be sided, but I think that there's a look and feel that we should go to. It should be painted a uniform color, or it should be so that we don't have the big gut awful writing on the side of a shipping container. Like bring it in, put a coat of paint. I think that there's some language that talks about accessory buildings needing to be, I don't know, uniform or not uniform, something
In a
along the
neutral
lines.
color or.
Yeah, like we can do that kind of thing, and just to make sure that somebody puts one in the hamlet, that it, you know.
Like, I know, like lots of areas, I would never see their container anyway, so to make them,
Yeah,
like, it really.
But we still want to work with property owners to encourage them to want to, you know, improve the look of their property too, right? Not just for everybody else. It's like,
yeah, and I see your point, and the reality is, as Mike will know, if somebody's not in compliance with, and they're in the middle of the bush and they put a shipping container in the middle of the bush, it's complaints driven. Unless somebody actually sees it and complains about it, chances are we're not gonna go out and just enforce the fact that it's not painted, but. I mean, does it technically need to be painted? Yes, but again, if it's in the middle of a 40-acre bush. Chances are, it'll never get noticed anyways.
That's right.
Yeah, it's in a populated area, so. Like Eric was saying, if it's an accessory building, then it falls under accessory use buildings, which we already have, right? So they have to have the setbacks, they can't be in front of the house line, so. Those are general already in there in our policies accessory. So if that's what we kind of agree that shipping containers are, then I think that. Even if it's an 8x20, it shouldn't be in front of the house, it has to be in the side or rear yard. If we classify them as accessory and not have them as a standalone. And again, they are only for storage, so you can't have plumbing, you can't have the heat, it's just storage for that 8x20. But then it comes into, it's the character of the neighborhood that you're building.
yeah,
Do we want to set those policies? Do we want to set those parameters, as you're saying?
well, maybe it's a certain buffer or minimum setback from where the primary residence and structure is from the road, so it is out of sight, then maybe there could be some flexibility around the position of that, but where it's an open facing property and there's.
Yeah, I see this as a site-specific thing as well, because sometimes you can have, or, you know, someone in breach of a setback, but then he's got a nice cedar hedge along the way, and it makes sense to put it there, like, you know what, you're fine, it's not actually, it's impeding by a foot, but it's completely concealed and your neighbors are happy with you. But sometimes this guy will meet all the setbacks, but he'll have an open yard and it's sitting right smack in the middle of the yard, and you're like, well, that looks like a shipping container in the middle of the yard.
Yeah,
So it's, yeah, I mean, you can put numbers on it, but I think it is gonna be like a site-specific kind of thing as well, right? Or, you know, there should be some neutrality in saying, okay, you've made the effort, it looks good, you painted it, but you're 2 feet over or 3 feet over, but your neighbors are happy with you, like, let it go, right? What I'm saying is like,
Your variance for that,
yeah,
because the current neighbor is, but then the next neighbor won't be.
you're right,
So as long as they have a minor variance, then it's
Yeah,
You're
totally
right.
fine to be where it is, right?
yeah.
and what's to stop those cedars being
Because
clear
it
cut
costs
some
more.
stage or an
Sure.
invasive species
What's
or
that?
something, right?
Oh,
Cost
sure.
for minor variance now.
50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, take the complaints as they come, right? If they-
Yeah, yeah.
It might be something that could be addressed through design guide in the future,
Yeah.
like secondary plan guidance,
Yeah.
so.
Like,
Just needs to be a policy. 'cause we
Yeah,
can't- we
policies
can't-
are commented, but everything would be more prescriptive in terms of what best practices, what we think would be appropriate.
often what I hear is that Bonfield's become more restrictive than a lot of other townships. I get that from a lot of people that I talk to.
I feel like we're catching up.
Yeah, I have to tell you, I have a different opinion. I feel as though Bonfield was not restrictive at all previously, and we're putting in rules and guidelines. Because the concerns that I'm hearing is our township is getting run down. That we're seeing properties that aren't being maintained appropriately, that aren't, so, yeah, I
But
agree
then
with
that's
Simon, I think
not
we're
the
catching up.
people. If it's a property standard,
Yeah,
then that's a different issue. But I'm looking here like township of Archipelago, no policy and official plan, township of Seguin, town of Perry Sound. Like a lot of the places, like we're not Huntsville, we're not,
Yeah, sorry, sorry, I'm missing the point.
like
As,
say,
yeah.
like some of the other municipalities and that
Yeah.
we're still a rural community.
Yeah, I guess the only question I would have
And,
is what has been put in place that has made it more restrictive?
well, no, in some of our other things, we've tried to bring, that were bylaws and things. like
Yeah.
Some of them are quite
So-
restrictive.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking, bear that in mind of our community. Of, you know,
I would say we have brought
what we
in.
do in rural.
And your worship, you can jump in. I think we brought in, or we haven't even brought in, there's consideration of bringing in one bylaw that is restricting. The short-term rentals or putting parameters around short-term rentals. The other one, which is trailers, actually is loosening the existing bylaw, or the considerations is
Yeah.
where the trailers aren't allowed at all right now, we're looking to make them legal in some parts of the community. So that's on vacant lots. You know, other than that, I mean, if you have examples, we're all ears for sure.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying in some like, well, we won't go to, the other bylaws, but I've showed some bylaws, like for trailers where they allow people on their recreational properties to use for a certain length of time, you know, to enjoy their property that they pay taxes on. And whereas, you know, that bylaw wasn't even, you know, put as one of the samples. So I'm saying sometimes we look at the ones that are more restrictive, then also to bring in the ones that are less restrictive.
Yeah.
So to have more
We
balance.
can't look at all 444 municipalities when we look at bylaws.
No,
so
but some of them are close
generally-
by. I'm talking about, you know, within the rural settings.
I mean, at the end of the day, if council chose to do nothing on the trailer bylaw, except to enforce the existing one.
Yeah.
But I mean, that
No,
would be.
I'm not arguing,
Yeah.
it's just an example of when we're looking at things today, if, you know, we can. you know,
Change
we-
can be
we-
a difficult process to manage, right? Whichever
Yes.
community you're in, and this
Yeah.
is the community is changing whether people like it or not, because of turnover of properties, right? And there's people
Well-
buying properties.
Our
It's not, we're
demographics.
not centering all the
No.
policies around them either. We're
And
trying
I'm
to
not
balance
talking about, say,
everyone.
yesterday, it's, you know, we're out here, they need storage for, you know, ATVs, fishing boats. You know, usually when you live out here, you got all these wonderful recreational things to do and to find. And some people, maybe that's all they can afford, or the recycling, which is awesome.
Sorry, I just want to pull it back to the
Yeah.
topic, but at the same time, want to remind you, we have a beautiful, beautiful thing going here because this committee has provided us with all
Oh,
this,
yes.
all these examples, and the
Yeah.
onus is on us to go and do
Yeah.
our homework and then pick out the points we want and then criticize the points we don't want, and that
No.
way.
I'm not
We can-
criticizing anything.
No, I'm just saying, like,
yeah.
overall, like,
Yeah.
you know, we have it at our fingertips. If you find something in Perry Sound that you wanna, you know, elaborate and say that this
Yeah.
is something that our community can
Yes.
benefit from.
Yeah.
Then this is the time to do it.
Well, that's what I was.
Okay,
Yeah.
So
That-
what we're
that's-
hearing
yeah.
from shipping containers, what we're hearing from shipping containers, that there's a lot of shipping containers. It's looking unorganized and they are taking away the character of the municipality. So we bring that to council and we say,
Yes.
here are
Yeah.
the issues that we've heard. There are no policies that say you have to paint a shipping container. So if that is, you know, is that something we want to consider? So that's why
yeah,
we're bringing this
Yeah.
forward for the discussion.
so.
So
Yeah.
if we're
I wasn't-
hearing that it's a concern, we're trying to address that concern when people are bringing them to council and staff.
Yeah.
In my view, I wouldn't go as far as say you have to slap a coat of paint on it. I think if it looks decent and they've made an effort to conceal it, because if it's behind a cedar hedge or whatever, then, you know, there's a certain standard, and if it doesn't meet the standard, you can say, look, it doesn't meet the standard, but I don't know where that standard is. But I think that I
That's
think
what
we
we're
would-
asking you
I
guys
think-
to help.
I think we would all know the
Might be-
standard if we drive by.
Like,
What
let's
I'm
say,
saying is, I don't know how
Yes.
to articulate it.
Until we send Mike to be like, hey, now it's up to Mike whether or not.
Yeah.
he thinks it looks good or not.
Well,
That's
petite-
tough to enforce, right?
Patina's a color too, right?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah.
let's say there was like a minimum like 30-meter landscape buffer or something
Yeah.
separating the
Yeah.
road. Find the right distance, but beyond that.
Behind a house,
So
I'm
in
not,
some of the bylaws that you have seen, are there any that you like? Of some of the samples that we did provide, like some
Yeah.
require that it has to be fenced, some say it has to be painted, some say it has to be fenced. Some say it has to be just in the rear yard, cause then you won't see it from more in a hamlet area, you won't see it from the road, so they can be disguised.
Yeah,
So,
I did review them and I think the ones I like, and I'm not gonna advocate for like, yeah, that's what I think is right, cause I just think it's site specific again, right? Like, I do like the idea of dressing it up, you know, even with some kind of wood, not fully, because you can go and say, okay, we need you to clad it. And then the guy's gonna be like, what do you mean clad it? So now I'm slapping wood on it, I'm slapping tin on it, and then they're gonna get like, you want me to clad it? Fine, I'm just gonna slap, you know, rusty sheets on it. There you have it, right? Like, you have, so I don't know what the answer is, but I just feel like it's not up to me to say like, that looks like trash, but you know, you kind of know what looks like trash when you see it.
But it shouldn't be up to Mike to say if something looks like trash or not either. That's honestly.
Yeah, it should be defined that way there. You have a reason for enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Because otherwise then it's an argument, right?
yeah,
That comes
because,
later through secondary plan guidance, but you need that policy hook to begin with. And
because what are,
Could it be loosely
all,
based?
they already
that's what
steal
I
or
mean, it's a
what
conversation.
are
that's
they?
what
doing?
I want to do,
Yeah, steel. Like honestly, the shipping container is probably the strongest structure you're gonna put on your
Yeah.
property. Like it's stronger than a house typically. So if,
So you're not gonna slap tin or steel.
well,
You
some
can
some
just-
people make
some
you
people
put
are
siding on it.
Lattice,
or-
whatever.
paint a mural.
Paint, yeah.
I've seen some beautiful.
People find shipping containers ugly, fair enough, but I'm like, I've seen some really ugly sheds too. Let's be clear,
Well,
right? I
that-
mean,
yeah.
Yeah, but we get to do something about them,
Somebody's,
but I don't know who that is.
okay,
yeah. So I guess the
Nobody
question,
else should
because
be.
okay.
like, and we can look to try and set loose parameters, like if it's visible by the road, if it's whatever, like, but it's got, whatever it is that we come up with has to be enforceable, or we just say shipping container, it's the wild, wild west and Bob's your uncle and good luck,
I'm not
except
saying that.
I don't think that's what our constituents have been
Last time,
saying.
did Eric sign in with a number?
That might be your.
Oh, it might be Eric.
Can you go to view? The only thing I'm thinking about the shipping containers is there a safety precaution? Like, for example, you know, those doors, they're quite heavy, and if you leave it open and a kid goes in and the wind takes it closed, the kid's not coming out, right?
Yeah. Oh, God, that's a whole other problem.
Yeah,
I missed it.
Then we live on the lake, a kid
I
could
see.
get out and
Sure.
it's down at the lake, what do we do, start fencing the lake?
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking, I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Okay,
No, the containers,
Different
I
sheets.
realize, yeah.
brilliant. This is great. We'll have another session of talking about that, but yeah, later down the line, maybe, So is there anything else on shipping containers other than, you know, the sight of them? Like, I think really just sticking to the policy side of stuff, yeah, we're keen to really get more feedback in terms of like setbacks and placements right now.
Like if it's a shed, should we just be following what any accessory building is?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be the fourth
Yeah.
one, so we'll come on to that
Yeah,
next.
okay.
So
I have
should
a
we move on to
question
Honeycomb?
We do that.
Should we do Honeycomb?
I have a question for Mike. Actually, I haven't met you, Mike. Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi.
So with regards to the shipping container that's oversized and you need a building permit for it. So what, other than obviously a site plan and whatnot, but what kind of foundation are you looking for a shipping container that is oversized?
Well, a shipping container is it's not prescribed in the building code. Therefore it would be considered an engineered building, right? So accessory buildings are supposed to be anchored down. So I guess an engineer would have to be brought in and certify the container and the anchorage to the ground.
Well, that's
On a flat piece of ground?
kind of, I don't know, in my opinion, excessive, right? Because
Yeah,
container is definitely more stable than a trailer, right? Like it, and so I think my question was, I was curious if you'd be asking for, like, for example, granulars compacted for drainage purposes or whatnot, but getting an engineered drawing for let's say 8x40 container would be, well, it would kill the deal for a lot of people, but
It's quite common how that's been applied in other municipalities from what I understand.
Really?
Yeah, particularly ones that have got more of an urban setting to them, because potential impact on other properties, right? You know, rather than a big, if it blew over in a rural 100-acre lot, then nobody might ever notice, but in some circumstances, it could be a liability.
well, the weight of a shipping container, but
Well, we're all in trouble. I would be inclined to agree, but I don't make the rules on that.
So that shipping container that comes in because it's the larger one. So then you're going to pay that building permit, the cost of a building permit that size,
For an accessory, yeah.
for
Yeah.
thousands of dollars?
Oh, no, that's for a house. We have accessory fees as well.
Oh, so
That's just
that's
an
an
accessory.
accessory.
It's an accessory use. Yeah, it's not
It's
4,000.
like building a shed.
Yeah, you're
big
building, it's an accessory use.
Okay.
it's a shed, yeah.
Yeah, can we confirm that 769915 is Eric?
Yes,
Thank you.
I should have wrote my name there.
You
Yeah.
can change it.
Oh, we know your number is 769915.
Yeah,
So, I get the need to move on and we'll talk about setbacks, but I don't think we've settled on.
Okay.
Site specific becomes tough. Like that, like, you know, our job is to create, or to recommend a bylaw that's enforceable. And site specific becomes very tough to be able to manage, so.
It applies to all.
we can have loose, you know, terminology that says, like, you know, does not impede, you know, path of travel to, or, you know, to backyard, like, you know, doesn't block, you know, just whatever, just like, you know,
Yeah,
visibility for your neighbor or something like that, loosely, whatever, right? Like, just kind of group that as a first pass, not that, you know, just to kind of we're starting big, you know, and then just tighten it up and see how far it takes us, right? Like, so if it doesn't work, then tighten it up a little bit more, but I think we should start loosely.
That's the word I was trying to say, like,
Yeah,
rather than more.
I don't
restrictive.
wanna, yeah, put a restriction on it and then everyone's like, are you kidding me? Like, this is, because then you can do a count and say 95% of the people that have shipping containers don't live in the hamlet and it doesn't apply to them. So now you've basically got 90% of the people who do have shipping containers to move theirs to be in compliance.
I think a shipping container, permit required or not, should be permitted wherever an accessory or a shed would be permitted on a piece of property. Mike, when we were having this conversation the other day, you were talking about what is it that, what's the language that it has to blend into something, or it has to look like
Instead of.
aesthetically something, right? So what do we enforce for sheds?
That would have to be in the bylaw, aesthetically pleasing, and it would have to be in the bylaw, it's not in the code, right?
Yeah.
But what we did say is that, we would perhaps have a bylaw that said the structure couldn't be, rust covered, right? So I don't know how you're gonna word that, but.
wouldn't that be in the property standards bylaw?
Yeah.
Well, we
property
could put
standard-
it there, but
Yeah. It's easier if it's not in the property standards. It's harder to enforce
Oh.
under property standards.
Oh.
So it's better if it's in a.
Here's a bylaw signed by Nicky.
Hey, brother.
Aesthetically pleasing.
And the structure shall be buffered by an adjacent properties with a visual barrier, either fence or tree line. To the height of the container shall be maintained in a condition free of rust, peeling paint, or any other form of visible deterioration.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm fine with
Yeah.
that. And then structure shall be buffered from adjacent properties with a visual barrier.
Sometimes that's hard to do.
Yeah, like what happens if they maintained it with no rust, no peeling paint, and it was no visible deterioration.
And what happens if
Do
you're,
we still need a buffer?
no, say if you're in a field?
Yeah, that, my only point would be, if my neighbor put, when I have a shipping container across from me, but this is about me. If there was a shipping container and I had to look at the big friggin' letters that, like, it just doesn't blend in. So I'm like, throw a consistent coat of paint on it. Like some color, I don't care if it's green or beige or whatever, that it just kind of, it's not an eyesore that we're looking at all the time, right? So, and I get your point, like if it's in the middle of the bush, like, well, if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a noise? Like, no.
Well, I'm
So
just thinking of somebody that overlooks a field and they have one there while the field goes on for
I hear you, yeah, so I
the
would,
horizon, so.
yeah, maybe we could say that if it's within whatever setback from property line, it needs to be.
So our setbacks on the property lines are 3 meters, so again, not in front of the house line. And then in a side or a rear yard, 3
Yeah.
meters.
So
there are
what
current
happens if
setbacks.
if we're gonna talk about needing to either clad it or paint it or whatever, that we, if it's within. I don't know, 50 meters of a property line, it needs to be painted or like pick a number, I don't
I
know.
almost think that's a little unfair because we don't say that for people's sheds and everything. And like somebody mentioned, some people's sheds,
I hear
you
you.
might see,
That's a property.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
maybe like this would be the same if it was so deteriorated and
Right. Yeah,
so that we're consistent no matter what it is.
So am I,
Just
like, are
food
we
for thought.
kind of close
Yeah.
that we're close to, it's an accessory use under the accessory?
Yeah.
And then we're okay with that wording if it's aesthetically pleasing, but not a buffer on a property line?
not a buffer on a property line. What does that
Or do you
mean?
want to put a buffer so that they don't have to put a fence or a tree line or something if it's, or do you want to set?
Well, I think.
Just trying to get some parameters so
Well,
we can.
We're
draw
back down to
something.
aesthetically pleasing.
If you went with 30 meters, then say like the conservation authority itself has that limitation to, shoreline development, stuff like that. So I figured that, again, it's suggesting it would be beyond that, but also, hopefully there would be a tree lined buffer along the shoreline as well, which we're trying to encourage.
But
So
I'm not for putting a buffer if it's not the case for every accessory building.
Right.
And I don't think we wanna do that, do we?
Some buffers are worse than nothing.
So let's walk us through. Mike gets a call, somebody called, my neighbor just put a shipping container. Like down, I can't see, whatever, like blocked a view, or it's really close to my property, whatever the minimum buffer is off of the property line. And it's an eyesore, it's all crappy and rusty and whatever, so Mike can go in and say, you gotta at least have it not look terrible.
Well, didn't that say painted? It just, you just want to remove the.
I don't,
No rust, no exposed rust, so,
No,
yeah.
but I'm just wondering
I don't
why,
know what that
then
says.
we're kind of. Devil's advocate, we're labeling them. And not all accessory buildings. So because they're a storage container. And they're the required size that's allowed.
I think the division there is that most accessory buildings, not all, but most are built with building materials, so then, yeah, the shingles or metal roof or whatever. And wood, yeah, they deteriorate, but at least you're still looking at a structure that was built and you know what it is, but a shipping container is not a natural thing to have in these parts. They're industrial, so you're putting an industrial, basically storage unit on the lot, and that's why we have to look at it differently. I see what you're saying though, because you could have a really, really ugly shed, and we're not addressing that, but however, the shed is almost like a natural thing because it's a built. It's a built structure, whereas container is industrial.
But you could also have a steel building.
Yeah, you can.
So that's
You can also have
industrial.
an ugly house. You can't tell your neighbor, I don't want you to live in your house.
Yeah, I know.
be in trouble there.
Yeah, but I'm saying with this,
Oh, like,
this
I don't
you could
like
also
the-
have a steel building. And that's not something people are used to either.
No, of course, but
And so
But
this
that
is
steel is
industrial.
typically made differently than what a steel
Yeah,
container,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Cause a Quonset hut has a very different level of steel than what this steel.
And with, I mean, and that comes with. But in order to put that up, you have like at least side foundations on it to
Mhm. Oh,
anchor it
yes.
in, and you've got all that,
Yeah.
right? So.
Yeah. Yeah, they're far out there.
So. I mean, I think we're actually pretty close. I think what we're struggling with is. Do we get into the kitchen to say, how do we make them look? Like, if somebody from out of town's driving through Bonfield, they're not gonna say, we are just an eyesore of ugly shipping containers. Or do we care, or, I mean. I think we're all on the side of, yeah, shipping containers are fine, like I have no problems with people using shipping containers as storage buildings. And do we just leave it at that, or do we look to put some parameters around look and feel?
I'm just like, we have a lot of rural property outside of the hamlet where putting those restrictions and no one, it's not,
But if they got the land and it's not an issue for them, then,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
yeah,
And that's where we say, like, if it's within 50 meters, 100 meters of your property line, these of any property line, you must comply with.
how many feet is
I-
100
yeah.
meters? That's a lot.
I picked the number, we can talk about it, I just threw a number out for.
let's say a meter is 3 feet thereabouts.
Yeah.
Mike?
I think it should be like it was mentioned before, should be somewhat freshly painted with a neutral color. Neutral, like it was mentioned, I think is important. I'd hate to see hot pink containers all over town.
Yeah,
But no, I like the structures. They're, like you say, the strongest container building you could ever get, but they are industrial in nature. If you take the nice new beige ones, like the one that was by the office, that's a good looking container. It'd be in the backyard, but by the same token, there's some that are all full of grease and all rusted, and it's a terrible image, right? Put a fresh coat of paint on it, then it looks like a nice structure. So as for setbacks, I think they should be the same as another accessory building, but that's my opinion.
yeah,
But
and then what about, can we get to the point where the setback's large enough that actually don't care if it's a little rusty and greasy, because to Gina's point, nobody's seeing it regardless. I mean, it's in the middle of the bush somewhere.
yeah, so we don't go after that, right? If it's like you say, if it's in the bush, who cares, right?
Well,
So-
that's it, but I wondered,
Complaint driven, right? So
would you be more comfortable having that in a bylaw that says if it's more than, pick a number? That.
well, if it's visible from the street, perhaps.
Visual range, yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
it's visible from the street.
Yeah, visual range from the street.
Feel it.
so is there an art program in Bonfield?
Yeah.
You could just get a local artist and they paint a mural of a house on the side of a.
Yeah, now it's in the house, yeah.
Well, rings up indoors.
Beautiful one.
Yeah.
Right, Foisey was here, yeah.
Is it like paint, like in a couple of years, if that all starts peeling?
Oh, yeah.
But we want people to maintain their yard.
Yeah.
Yes,
We want
yes.
to
oh,
be
absolutely.
a community that has pride in what we look like. So we want them to paint.
Yeah, but
Okay,
I'm just saying a lot,
Community education or development programs in the
Yeah.
future, right? And we'll
Yeah.
get a paint company to sponsor.
Yeah.
We'll paint it. in
or
the
tell us the
container.
best paint to use.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
It doesn't peel.
We'll go to Home Depot and buy every can of their mix match neutral paint and be like, here you go.
It's our paint program.
Yeah.
Leftover paint, yeah.
Right. Okay. Should we, I'm taking a buzz leave here. We're happy with that one for now. I mean, we've not finished the conversation, but,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, next slide then.
Oh, not part of it anymore.
Uncaps. So Mike probably got comments on this too, but yeah, so we've got here the points to consider at the moment, the minimum size requirements that we have in terms of cottages being 400 square feet, dwellings 807 square feet, So there's a couple of extra points there about, you know, should there be a maximum size to this? Again, what would be the setbacks beyond the property for those hunt camps? Consider there might be additional amenity issues in hunt camps. People that tend to go there, the activities that take place. And how subtle was that? And also a minimum size of the property, you know, again, like allowing potential for some health and safety hazards in the process of hunting, but also just to, again, preserve the amenity of neighboring residents or whoever else is in the property. So any thoughts around hunt camps?
Maybe I can just put that in that currently our zoning bylaw, we do not make provisions for hunt camp. You are allowed to have a private club, but a private club on a large tract of land. So they, you know, people come in to get the hunt camp. So a hunt camp, and Mike, maybe when I'm done, you can explain the difference between like what the seasonal requirements are versus what a dwelling is, what a hunt camp can be built for. But so, you know, they're coming onto properties and they're building hunt camps, which we don't actually allow them. So we should allow them. We know that Bonfil has lots of hunters and lots of large tracts of land. So we should definitely clean that up a little bit. But there are different building code applications. So maybe Mike, you can explain?
Yeah, so under seasonal dwellings, they're buildings, they're residential buildings that are not occupiable on a year-round basis. Therefore, you don't have to provide many amenities that you would for a house, right? So you don't have to meet any R values if you're going to insulate it at all. You don't have to have running water, many things, right? But the danger in not setting a size is that if the building permit is lower and you're exempted from meeting the building code and you don't have a maximum size, then everybody's going to build hunt camps that they're going to live in, right?
Right.
So
And
that's
we already have that in Bonfil. We already have a number of places that were built as hunt camps that have become primary residences. So we do want to make sure that we can kind of clean that up.
Like, how many houses are we talking about in our township where this has occurred?
Well, we dealt with 5 of them in 1 year. So there are a few. We're trying to clean them up through other means and figure out what we can do, but
So
they're still in there.
does it make sense from a minimum size to stay, a maximum size up to 399 square feet? Anything over that, you would be building a cottage. Doesn't mean you can't stay in your cottage and hunt. Like, that's but you would have to build a cottage. Like, I'm just trying to figure out how we get away from that mix.
It's a good point though, because we could still make hunt camps 400 square feet as the maximum.
Right.
Because it's built to the same standard as the seasonal, a cottage is seasonal. So it can be built to the same things, but a cottage is gonna be more on a waterfront, could be in the rural, but hunt camps will only be in the rural.
Right.
So you could still say. Call it a hunt camp with a maximum of 400 square feet.
No.
Right, sorry.
Mike?
yeah, I think there should be a maximum too. You know, because we're talking about small buildings built in the bush that you perhaps go enjoy deer hunting for a week and that's it, right? Otherwise, you could have 1,800 square foot homes that are listed as hunt camps, and there's no power, there's no bathrooms, nothing. There's no standard.
Right.
And would the minimum be 162 square feet? So that it's larger than what a structure would be that doesn't require planning, any building permits?
Well, the 161
Yeah.
is only for storage. Soon as someone is going to stay overnight, and there's going to be a human in it, then
Mhm.
that's not a storage building anymore. You need a permit.
Yeah, but to that point, that if they did just say, oh no, it's just the storage unit, but then used it as a hunt camp, if it was below 162.
But if it's a hunt camp below 161, you need a permit.
You need a permit.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if there's plumbing in any building, you need a permit. So the building could be 5 feet by 5 feet. Right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we built a deck and it's like a water
Yeah.
tent that we put up over here. Nah. But what we'd like to stay in is some level of a bit more of a secure structure that can stay up year round, but like we're there for the odd weekend over the summer and then hunt camp week, but other than that. Like, so. Yeah,
Idea?
What kind of hunt camp do you like to see?
I see the issues that are being raised, but, that's a tough one. I think, yeah. As soon as you start insulating it, to me, it's not the size that, you know, that I'm thinking of. It's basically, does it have water? Does it have, you know,
Fine,
plumbing or not even plumbing, but like, does it have an outhouse, right? Does it have insulation and what's the source of heat? And then like, because you can tell the difference between a hunt camp versus a seasonal cottage when you go inside and you realize that this one's furnished, one's, you know, basically just a shed, right? So I don't know how to differentiate that, like, where do you, how do you word it, right? But
Eric, do you have any comments on the hunt camp?
Just trying to think of the hunt camps I visited. So. Yeah, I like the maximum size. Yeah. Once it's over 400 square feet, it's a cottage.
and should be built as a cottage that you can still
Yeah.
hunt. Like if you have,
Sure.
sorry, Eric.
Yeah, you can hunt from the dwelling if you want,
Yeah.
depending where you are. Yeah. I guess it depends also on the minimum size of the property also like that. Setbacks and minimum size, yeah. Because you're not going to build a storage shed in the middle of nowhere. Call it just a storage shed. That's for sure.
Not in life, just on paper.
So, yeah.
what happens about existing?
Yeah. Well,
Well,
Is it illegal non-conforming
no,
No.
because they weren't legal in the
Because they're
first
illegal.
place.
unless it was a private camp?
Right.
Right.
Very few of them are actually called private camps. Some are storage. The permit actually says storage on it. We know people are living in it, staying overnight.
All right. Not so many comments on that one, but
no,
Okay, but what do you think about minimum size? I'm not an avid hunter. Is 25 acres enough to have a hunt?
Oh, yeah.
mhm.
20 acres is enough, honestly. Yeah.
Hey, let me tell you, at my house, you can have a hunt and deer. No problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Can you slide over your address?
Yeah.
Yeah, as a guy who sat out for a week and didn't see one, that'd be nice.
Oh, no, not a couple this week.
No, I got none.
Tonight, you missed coming home, moose,
Oh,
right there on the side of the road. Right by, that, gas station that used to be Mr. Gas.
Mhm.
It's
Oh,
down
really?
there on Highway 17, coming home.
wow.
So what is safe distance for, because if you get too small of a piece of property, now all of a sudden, now it could abut on crown land. Like you could have 1 million acres to go hunt on and just have a hunt camp that abuts, right? So, you know,
Cause the hunt camp can get you there and then you ATV in the morning to go to your
Mhm.
crown land, right? So
right,
you're not necessarily hunting on that land, it's just for you to.
yeah. I still
staking-
think there should be a minimum size property, but,
10 acres of it?
well, I mean, to Cam's, it could be 0.5 of an acre if all you're doing is sleeping there and going to it, but we have to assume that a hunt camp will be active hunting on it, right?
Yes.
I think that's a fair assumption we'd have to make. So what is a safe?
I don't know any hunter that stays confined.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe that's my problem.
Yeah.
Don't blame me, Hunter.
I believe there is a certain distance from a residence also you have to be to hunt or
right?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of my point. It's not necessarily about like the space that they have or any amenity considerations, because guys will be guys, girls, whoever goes to the hunt camp, right? But what's the impact on adjoining properties? So how would these setbacks and considerations relate to that?
Mhm.
Now, to be fair, if your property is on next to Crown land, somebody can be hunting
Mhm.
basically on your property line,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like it's the Wild Wild West when it comes to Crown land for,
But in
Setbacks,
general, if we
Yeah.
look at just what the majority of our properties are rural, then like, what is the safe distance for a gun to discharge? And
well, I can say.
that's what it's about.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, it could be archery.
Could be archery. Yeah, and then the other problem is, depends on how many people, like, so 20 acres, I can tell you if 5 of us can hunt 20 acres, I mean, we're all in tree stands, but like 5 of us can hunt 20 acres, no problem with all the safety in place. If you're by yourself, what is that, like 5 acres that you would need, like? I don't know. Obviously, Mike, you're a hunter as well, I'd take your thoughts on this, just cause you know, trying to not make it too
Well,
restrictive.
I don't think we should get into that. I think we should leave the onus on the hunter to obey the provincial laws. I'd hate to be responsible for, I don't know, setting regulations that perhaps somebody will get hurt.
Yeah,
But to your point, should the size of the unit reflect the occupancy, i.e. the number of individuals, and therefore should the lot size then also reflect the potential capacity of hunters on a property? So if
yeah,
it's one individual, it could be smaller, 5, 10, etc.
No.
No, there shouldn't be.
no.
in 20 years, that one hunt camp could be a completely different group of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Eh,
so we don't want a people zone.
Yeah.
But the M&R regulates where you could hunt and where you can't.
on
They're
private
all in
property, yeah.
zones.
Somewhat,
Pardon?
somewhat.
Yeah,
So much, yeah.
Depends what you're doing, right? If you have a tag,
They're on-
if you're moose hunting, there's tag specific deer hunting or tag specific for.
Area, yeah.
unless you go for a buck.
Say if you're hunting birds.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
you're free to go anywhere.
Yeah.
Ducks, you're free to go anywhere. Bear, you're free to go anywhere.
And
They set the area, but on private property, they're not. They can come in to say you don't have a tag to shoot it, but they can't tell you you can't hunt your private property.
so I think instead of minimum size of property, because at the end of the day, you know, to Mike's point, like you could be standing 3 feet from your property line and be in compliance, doesn't matter if you have 1,000
Yeah.
acres, right? So I think it's actually more based on setbacks, like, so you can't be, like, is it 100 feet from your property line or whatever it ends up being, but that's not a safety thing, that's just a respect to your neighbors thing, right? So whatever that would typically be for.
Let me put it a different way then. Should there be a buffer around the hamlets themselves? Then anything beyond that you can hunt, but you know, again, for the noise, the discharge of a weapon, like some of the concerns or police calls that might arise.
Yeah,
We
you
have
have
that
that
bylaw
discharge
already.
within the hamlet.
We have that.
Over there somewhere, people wanted to shoot, practice the bow,
Okay,
but they live just right in the hamlet. So, right over here,
right.
but so they couldn't, the daughter couldn't practice bow hunting.
Okay,
But a neighbor up the road, just a little bit, offered that she go in there and do her practice.
Yeah,
So, but in the hamlet, you couldn't
yeah.
discharge a firearm, and a bow was considered a firearm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with Mike on this, like, with regards to the hunting, I don't think we should
Yeah,
set any kind of guidelines and saying, because you're hunting, you have to. With regards to the structure, like, I don't think anyone's gonna be putting hunt camps around the hamlet. Or both hamlets,
No,
so I don't think we have to worry there.
so we shouldn't worry about. If we
Size.
say it's 25 acres, that's our concern,
yeah.
right?
Well, I think that there should be no hunt camps in the hamlet at all, let's be honest, cause if
No.
somebody,
can't-
yeah.
You can't just start to hunt.
Right, and you don't want somebody, like, even if they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go hunt on that crown land, well, it still doesn't look nice, cause there's no. No, like, they can build basically whatever they want right in the hamlet, you don't want that,
No,
I mean. Yeah, I think it's about setbacks and it's not huge setbacks, it's what's our setbacks for cottages off the property lines? Or any dwelling or,
In the rural area, your minimum front yard is 10 meters. Your side yards are 6 meters and your rear yard are 10 meters.
like, I don't know why we would have to change that, I think it's just, it is what it is, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Any more comments on hunt camps
So
or?
we'll just permit them.
Mhm.
Well,
Rural zones.
in a rural zone to a maximum size of,
Well, to all zones outside,
yeah,
to
outside of
all-
hamlet.
outside of the hamlet.
Generally rural. But would you
So
allow
we
them
can
on
send
the
that
water,
action
on
to-
the,
399.
the RLSs are all around the lake and they are under 2.5 acres. A lot are under 2.5 acres. And our waterfront's already populated. Very
Yeah.
populated.
Do we want hunt camps on the waterfront?
No,
I agree.
I wouldn't say so.
No. On a waterfront or the two main waterfronts, that's a different story, right? Not,
On any?
I don't know what other lakes have nice spots, but. Well, what I'm getting at is if there's a 25 to 50 acre parcel of land and it goes to a lake that's only accessible by their land. Then why
Oh,
why
yeah.
couldn't they
Mm.
have a hunt camp and then canoe across the lake, which is Crown land anyway?
Hmm.
That's all I'm saying, like, you could say no hunt camps on Ospensing and Talon because it's all residential zoned. And no hamlets, but if you're out and you have Crown land all around you, then, and you are on a lake.
Your lake with that, that's right.
Hey, but
Well,
somebody,
there's small lakes, right, like,
Oh, there's CD and there's.
but don't forget on Talon, you just canoe across that lake and you're all on Crown. Where there's great deer.
what was there?
Yep.
No, there's good.
Everybody knows now.
Won't be for long now, it's on the big YouTube.
Could you draw me a map?
Good point, but yeah, would we work out a bit of distance recommendation for that then for these populated areas where there's shoreline residential? Like, maybe I get the point to the northern side there where there's Crown land, but just off the hamlet here, around the.
Well, isn't that Hamlet though? That isn't that shoreline Hamlet,
No,
the Hamlet?
these sections of it, but no.
What about, like, so
The
Pine Lake is not overly populated, but it's half decent lake, got a road named after it. So, like, I get your point, like, when is it?
That's all.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah, Pine Lake.
Anyway.
Pine Lake's a pretty good example,
Yeah,
because half of Pine Lake is, there's nothing on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's owned by the province. Most of it is.
yeah.
Boy, this stuff is complicated, ain't it?
That's why we are all brainstorming on what to
Yeah.
do. Yep.
And don't forget, they're all living documents, so if something comes up,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the motto in municipalities.
All right, so we can move on to the final section then.
can I just ask, is that in the zoning bylaw, those, for the dwelling and the cottage?
Yeah.
For some reason, why was I thinking it was 900 and some?
Okay, it's, a house is 75 square meters, which is 870, and then the cottage, the seasonal is in here as well. I might not have that, each 40 square meters.
And so, for a cottage, under the building code, we can
And
We
there
can
are
see-
zoning.
we can see what's required under the building code for a seasonal dwelling.
Oh, right, in order, like, for what my.
For building,
about it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And Mike, tell me the difference between a hunt camp and a cottage?
There's none.
Yeah, it'd be deemed seasonal.
So it would be up to 806 square feet then basically
No,
is,
400. The 40 square meters. A
Yeah.
dwelling, if you're gonna have a dwelling,
It's a dwell,
yeah. But if there's no difference from a building code, so somebody's gonna come in and say, I'm gonna build a hunt camp.
A
How
little
big?
bit bigger.
Yeah, a
It's-
little bit bigger. Okay, we're gonna call it cottage. So does it matter at that point? Like, what's the difference between a hunt camp and a cottage?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
There's no difference. There's no difference really.
right, so it would go up to 800. Now, a cottage would have an assessed value.
Yes.
Hunt camps would not have an assessed value, or would they?
Well, cottage is assessed, again, impact does the assessment, but
Yeah,
cottages are, that they're more, like they're seasonal, they're typically in waterfront, so they have a different parameters. A hunt camp is just a recreational,
right.
yeah, so they have different classes within the assessment.
So could somebody essentially come out and say, I'm gonna build a hunt camp and then build a cottage, never hunt out of it? Like it's,
For sure they can.
So does a cottage have water and septic?
oh, it'd still be
It'd
assessed.
be assessed.
but at a different.
Yeah.
So cottage, does it have water and septic?
It doesn't need it.
No, it doesn't need it? Oh, okay.
No, seasonal
So it
dwelling,
is a
right?
hunt camp, okay.
You can have no water inside in an outhouse.
You would have an outhouse, yeah,
It's
some
assessed, it's
sanitary
waterfront.
protection.
Yeah.
It's gonna go out, but-
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it all
that definitely
depends.
factors
Yeah,
into.
yeah, so.
But they're still assessed that they're not used year round.
Right,
So then I wonder if that's why we go to 399 instead of 4, and then it gets classified as a cottage after that, like. I mean, how big do you need your hunt camp before you call it a cottage, right? I mean,
Mhm.
399 square feet is a pretty big hunt camp.
Yeah.
If that's all the purpose is, it's for a hunt camp.
yeah, but if you get 12 guys like you in a hunt camp, that 399 is very.
Yeah, but then you need to build the cottage and you can hunt out of that, right?
Or say it's a cottage.
Or say it's a cottage, yeah.
All right,
My problem more is somebody builds 500 square feet and calls it a hunt camp.
Mhm.
Then if it changes it from an impact point of view.
I bet you it wouldn't be much in taxes difference.
Yeah, I can maybe look at to see what some of them are.
Yeah. I mean, if it makes no impact, then go up to the 806 square feet.
Yeah.
You
I'll
can build
use
up to,
5 properties will be dealt with, but yeah.
Yeah. it's one heck of a hunt camp.
But that,
Well, you need a big room for a big table, so you know.
Yeah,
Like
grandma cards, yeah.
Cause you don't wanna be where all the bunkies are, where that's where all the snoring's going on.
True.
all right, so final,
I'm gonna have to excuse myself.
you gotta go?
Yeah, I gotta go, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Do we lose quorum?
Well, we still have 3 of 5, so we're.
Okay, yeah, we're good. Oh, yeah,
Oh,
Eric's coming
perfect.
back in. Yeah,
come
yeah.
on,
yeah.
Eric.
Eric's back in, all right.
We have
All right,
4.
you can watch it afterwards anyways.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good
Do
night.
you have any parting words like Eric did on the
Yeah.
accessory buildings?
No.
All right, very good. Yeah.
Yeah,
Accessory.
but I came back.
It's not like.
Loosely,
Loosely.
loosely.
Okay. All right, so final bit then, so accessory building structures and uses, so everything else that isn't categorized in what we already talked about. So the new Ontario Building Code 2024 allows a storage building of 161 square feet, so we mentioned this, without a permit, if used for personal storage only. So no plumbing or heating is to be provided inside. And the township's existing procedure requires the applicant to sign an agreement and obtain a house permit plus an accessory structure permit at the same time. Then they have between 18 to 24 months to complete the house. And this provides some flexibility to allow for accessory buildings considered necessary for construction purposes, but prevents the continuous use of an accessory structure without the primary dwelling beyond the typical construction time frame. And so again, what we need to consider here is the required location on each property, i.e. the rear or interior side yard setbacks. And preference not to, we have a preference not to allow in front of the house, as was mentioned before, so. We're now talking structures below 161 square feet.
Or any,
Already. This-
so you can have a garage.
Yeah,
So again, this is the same thing that's happening with the hunt counts, where people are building a structure, they're gonna build a house on their property. And they, you know, our bylaw currently allows for them to have an accessory building for the store, and our zoning is particular, it says for the storage of material and tools. But people are putting heat and plumbing and everything in these buildings once they get on the permit, and then they're living in them. So we have implemented the policy that you have to have the house permit and the accessory permit at the same time. So that, one, because accessory buildings have to be behind the house line, so if we don't know where your house is on your property, then we don't know where your accessory building is, so how do we give that permit? So we have to make sure that we're within that, we're following the other constraints on there. So yeah, we're looking at kind of tightening up those rules so that the accessory buildings are not turning into, for purposes other than what they were actually permitted for.
Or sitting on there for multiple years because the house never been.
And the house is never built, right? Yes. Yeah, we dealt with 2 of those last year for different policies and stuff.
Were they?
So
living
that's become a big problem in the municipality. It's very difficult to enforce. People are building sheds and they're living in them. And you'd be surprised how many there are.
So is it because, like, there's obviously a housing issue, if that's why they're
Yeah.
living there?
Yes, but we have a bylaw that permits the construction of a shed prior to the primary building, and that's the problem.
There's a reason that there's a building code to build, like, for fire safety and like just human safety, right? So to live in a shed is not safe.
Well,
Yeah.
it depends on the shed, because some of them are pretty structural.
Sure, but we have to just assume that they're gonna have a source of heat in there, they're gonna have a source of
Yeah,
something that, and it's not necessarily built with the setbacks or the all of the minimum standards,
but
right?
I
So-
was just looking at another point that there must be a reason.
Oh, I'm
for-
there,
Yeah.
100%.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
affordability is everywhere.
Yeah.
And that has to be the top of our mind on everything that we
Yeah.
do. When we look at anything, it's about affordability. It's about making sure that residents can actually attain housing, but safely. Like there are instances where, you know, our CBO is driving around and people are turning sheds into homes and not getting permits. Right, so, and you know, like they're putting additions on sometimes and not getting permits. So there's no inspections, there's no drawings, there's nothing. And then they go to sell the property, and then, I mean, that was the one that we had like this year, they sold the property and then now they want to build a house. Well, you have a structure on your property that doesn't even have a permit and you live in it, right? And it has been happening.
I would much
So-
prefer allowing a tiny house than somebody building a shed with no code, nothing. Like a tiny home would at least have to meet the minimum code requirements of safety.
And that's the
Yes.
problem with vetting. That's the hesitation with a lot of tiny homes, is they don't meet the code. They're built in a factory, but they're not to the codes that, but it's the R rating stairs, they're not done the right way. So it's so particular, so. That's why they're not all full blown in every municipality, you know, there's lots of things.
but
So,
those rules are
that's
for
all
the
the-
pre-engineered structures that can be signed off and approved, but yeah, we're in that grey area
Yeah.
where they're not yet all accepted or to code.
Yeah, I don't know that we wanna jump on the beginning with that bit. I'm all for being the first on a lot of stuff, but
Yeah,
that one
this-
makes me nervous, yes.
I just feel bad that, you know, people have to resort to that, and I'm thinking, oh, well, it's a better shelter than what I saw on Sherbrooke Street going on.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, on
Don't
their own
absolutely
property,
agree, but it's not safe, right? So then
Well,
like the
we
shed
don't-
that
yeah.
burnt down.
It may not be code, but I think sometimes we can say it's safe in a shelter. But I realize it's a zoning and a bylaw.
Yeah, we would be asking them to get our pantsuit off if we started to allow that kind of stuff and something disastrous happens.
I just think that I'd be sad if I had a piece of property and I was homeless. and I had a nice little shed from Heritage or one of the Hickory.
If that's all you've
It's a sad,
got, and
it's
it's
sad.
been gifted to you in some way, but if you're in a position to buy a lot in the first place, and yes, we're all facing these hardships around
Yeah,
inflation.
no, it's just sad,
You
like,
know,
Yeah,
it is.
but you know what, you just have to kind of
yeah.
look around in our own township and see it. And you wonder,
Oh, yeah.
What's going on, you mean?
yes,
Yeah.
or what would be better? You know, when people are sleeping in their cars and,
Yeah.
Well, that's
And-
even
and-
happening
Well, and
here.
to that point, the provincial
Oh,
planning
sure.
statement certainly seeks to achieve a housing mix across this whole
Yeah.
spectrum of everything that we've talked
And it-
about. But something that we speak to the point about attainable housing is encouraging more and more
Yeah.
development out in the rural areas versus in some instances building townhouses or multi-residential units, because there is also a demand for that. Some people might want to relocate from their existing property and still stay in the township of Bonfield, but not maintain their whole property, but move into a smaller unit, and that's going to help to churn in the housing market and allow other people to move in, potentially build an additional residential unit,
Yeah.
which creates a revenue stream to allow them to live on these larger rural lots. So we can see a lot of turnover and change, and it's like how do you accommodate the needs of everyone at all different stages of life in the township.
Some serious times going on.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's
oh, sorry.
something to, another thing to address and, you know, what could we do to help?
Yeah, for sure.
When we know of families or,
What's out of our control is allowing somebody to build, to live in a structure that's not up to building code. I mean, we don't have the ability to say, oh yeah, we're okay with that. The province will go like,
yeah,
nope. So, like, it's not even a thing. I mean,
exactly, it's all about safety of people
Absolutely.
living in garages and that sort of.
when we had a fatality a couple of years ago with somebody living in a garage that
so,
wasn't, was sad.
yeah,
And there are, like, so when we hear, like, we know that there are some people who are living in less than desirable
conditions.
conditions, whether it's the car or whether, you know, and they choose to live like this. Some people just choose to live like this. We've seen that in a few instances, but we reach out to the GSABs, we reach out to the agencies and we're like, can you go and help this person? Can you go and help this person? So we're trying to facilitate that and coordinate those services so people aren't living in those conditions.
Mhm.
And that's like the different hat that we wear from the planning team, but we're trying to facilitate helping them better their own life so that, but some people just want to live like that.
Mhm.
Yes, and it's not safe, like there's someone living in 8x10. I don't think it's an 8x10, and there's a wood stove and there's like no protection,
Wow.
there's no safety. And you know, I am terrified, but I've sent the agencies out to help.
Mhm.
Right,
So
so,
not so close.
yes.
Yes. of
And then
course.
they introducing, and that's why we want to do this housekeeping bylaw, as Simon was saying. If we can get the additional dwelling units going faster and we can get those permissions and we can get the policies in for that. We're going to be able to provide more housing opportunities for those people who can't afford. I mean, I would rather them live in an ADU as opposed to a shed.
And we have a very small piece to play in this. The reality is we have a
Absolutely.
housing crisis across the country
Oh, yeah,
and in the province, which is creating an affordability crisis because landlords are like, well, I can get $1,800 for this apartment, and if there was a market for it, you'd be like, oh, that's $700, not $1,800, right? So, but unfortunately, supply and demand, with the supply low, the demand is high and the prices go up. So, we'll play our small part, which is, hey, let's allow as many ADUs as possible, given the different things we talked about, and hopefully that'll help
I
some
realize.
affordability.
Hickory shed isn't the answer, but,
Yeah,
it's sad.
it is sad for sure.
It's better than the tent in the middle of winter.
Yeah.
Completely agree. It's just, we
Yeah.
want to promote those ADUs.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Of course, but in the interim.
Yeah.
What are all these people gonna do this winter?
And I think they're gonna have to rely on some services,
Yes.
some government services, right? I mean, there's shelters, there's alternatives. They might not like them, but
And our taxes go to paying for that, so,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
yeah,
so.
Okay, so accessory building structures, which I think what we've determined is we're gonna pretty much put shipping containers into this category as well, right?
Yep.
So it's just shipping containers are permitted. And I would like to think that our accessory buildings, Gina, could you remind me of the language that from the. Like, I
We
think
were
our
just
accessory
saying-
buildings, yeah, should comply with the same,
Just,
the last two.
be appealing.
Yeah.
No, aesthetically appealing.
Yeah. Like, I think that would make sense for all of our accessory buildings as well.
And then if it's a property standard, then
Right. It's better, like it would
So-
be captured in this bylaw, right?
So are we comfortable with saying that you have to have the permit at the same time as the house permit and you have 24 months?
Yeah.
To build. So you can still build your accessory building first, but then you have to build your primary within 24 months and you have to continually be working on it. And that's under the building code with Mike anyway. But then they can still build that accessory to store their materials, but you can't have heat and you can't have plumbing
right,
inside. Are we comfortable with that?
can I just? Doing a lot of talking, but
That's the purpose of tonight.
when. Like, say if you do some of your own future planning. Why is it that if someone has a vacant lot, be it rural, be it waterfront, why can't I have an auxiliary or someone have an auxiliary building on their property that they bought for retirement or they bought real estate to plan for the future? Why is it that you just don't want a building? If you already said you can't have plumbing, you can't have heat, why can't you put 161, say if you want the minimum, why can't you put that on it? Because you might want to go there, maybe you do food harvesting, you're into fiddleheads, you're into mushrooms, you're into shaga. Why, you want to put your stuff in there. You want to come and enjoy the property for the day. You want someplace to put life jackets and you got to haul all that stuff.
I think it's one, if I can.
Go ahead.
But I think this is one of those situations where Bonnfield is catching up. There are very few municipalities that actually still allow this. For the same reasons that we're trying to change the policy. Most municipalities have already removed this, that you can have the accessory prior to the primary dwelling. But I think in forward thinking, I think the trailer bylaw that is being proposed does allow for someone to do exactly what you're talking about. So they can come and enjoy their property for a day, they can have a trailer on it, they can have a small shed on the trailer property. So I think that, where we might give and take from one, we're taking from one, we're giving from another way to do this, to still make it so that someone can enjoy their vacant land. But so that we're still making the restrictions and we're putting in those policies that will keep everyone safe, because you can't people zone. So we can't say that, oh, you're retired and you promise to only come from fiddleheads when people are actually coming and doing more. Like, that's the evidence that we're seeing, is that people are building them and then moving in.
Yeah, but that shed is only a small shed. So it doesn't, I don't know.
I'll say to your point, Gina, I think you make a good point, because like to tie that in, what we are wanting to loosen in our restrictive trailer bylaw, we're loosening it in our rural areas and so not waterfront, not hamlet, but you can, if you have rural and you want to put a trailer. Maybe we have to be okay with that with this too, to Gina's point, to be like, hey, listen, I want to put my patio furniture in there for the winter, but in the summer I want to come in and enjoy my piece of rural property for whatever. Because it is contradictory to me to be able to say, yeah, we're going to allow it for trailers, but then we're going to restrict it for, as long as it has wheels, we're okay. But now if it doesn't have wheels, we're not okay anymore. That's the.
Yeah.
I have to rectify that in my head.
Yeah, I'm just talking about like
Yeah.
a building that you can store your stuff. You bring your kayaks out and you wanna, and then I got no place. And in today's world, you need to lock things up. That sort of
Yeah,
thing, like I've seen people that might not build on their property for 12 years.
Mhm.
And until they can move here, they've done their own planning. And so they've purchased it and then you can't even put a building on it. It's like, well, geez, I want to bring the kayaks and the life jackets and the noodles or
Yeah.
the same at a bush lot.
Mhm.
It's absolutely because you can't, people don't, how do you ensure that the use is going to be the appropriate use?
Well, how
And
can
be
you
able to
anywhere,
enforce it.
anywhere though? How can you
Absolutely.
ensure that and that, you're allowed to have it, but there's no plumbing, and then you've got something, they're not abiding by the bylaw.
So a seasonal
The
dwelling.
thing is, plumbing is added after the fact. There's
Yeah.
many components that are added after the fact. So Sudbury removed that, they changed that policy over 20 years ago that you cannot build an accessory building before the primary. And it's to that effect. People are moving in and it's not enforceable. Before you know it, they got plumbing in there, they got God knows what in there, and we're not allowed inside. And try to prove that somebody's living there year round. Right?
So if that's our
it's not
problem,
enforceable.
solution to that problem. So this is our solution, is that you have to have a permit for the primary. And that, so I mean, open to ideas, that's the whole point of brainstorming and looking at all the different policies and everything out there. But that's the crux of the problem that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, because I just feel bad that people can't use the property then, and they're paying
They can still
taxes.
use it, it's
I know, but
not as conveniently.
yeah, not as conveniently, and it's just
yeah.
like but they're trying to.
So how, what's yours? I'm not putting you on the spot, they
Yeah.
don't, like, I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, so
Well, to me,
here's what we have to
any-
solve, so.
anything could be to that same argument that you're saying, that could apply to anything. The same argument, what people could do and not abide or change.
But going back to that site-specific approach of where locations are and some of the other development constraints, or whether a lake is a capacity and all various other factors might impact, how intense a use of a property could be.
Yeah, but I'm just talking about an auxiliary, a building that's that's 161.
Yeah.
That's all I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
So our bylaw right now
Yeah.
doesn't even allow for the shed that would store the
Yeah,
life jackets.
yeah, or if somebody wants to
It's not.
put a
usable.
potato garden in and grow vegetables, they don't even have a place to put their rake and their seeds and yet they're paying taxes on that property, but you can't.
challenging, because I don't think they're gonna drive off the property to use the washroom somewhere else. They're gonna find a solution which is probably not good for that lot. Right.
Put a class.
Ask
Class A, class one.
ask him when he's hunting.
Yeah, well, we have a class one fun outhouse, so. And had to, we were forced to, like, that's of
And
course the
I
thing.
think most people are gonna be cautious, if it's their property, they're not
Yeah.
gonna,
But to Nikki's point about whether it's like a trailer that's
Yeah.
on there, which had some
Yeah.
systems integrated into it versus a
I was
structure
just-
where we don't have access to it, we
Yeah.
don't quite know what's
Yeah,
going
that's
on
fair.
there.
I was just asking, like, it doesn't seem you pay taxes and you can't even have a little accessory building on it to store stuff when go out to your land, whether you're got a garden going or, for whatever
I get it,
purpose.
and it's one of those necessary challenges that, like, okay, so if the problem is those that want to abuse this, like, unfortunately, those that don't want to abuse the system are gonna suffer because we have to make sure that those that we're protecting away from, those that want to abuse the system, which is I'm gonna build this accessory building and then to Mike's point, I'm gonna throw in a bit of plumbing after and I got a little heat source in there and then we have no ability to go in and monitor that after, right? So
And which is unfair to other taxpayers that are paying full taxes for dwellings.
Right.
Meanwhile, some are living in these little sheds, whatever, and they're paying vacant land tax.
Well, I guess like in our, out of 884 dwellings, how many people are doing that?
Can you'd be surprised. I can think of
Increasing.
20 off the top of my head.
And well, yeah. Yeah, it's a problem in Bonnfield. It is a problem in Bonnfield.
That goes back to the whole tiny home ADUs. You get more of them, then we can.
Yeah, but that's not gonna solve the person that's bought a piece of vacant land that has no intentions of building on it for 10 years.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I
Is
think,
Bonnfield a community where people, is this about land banking and speculation? I mean, we want people to buy land and move here and grow
Yeah.
and develop a family as well, right?
to be honest, like.
Well, I'm gonna
again,
say, I have friends that bought, but they could move because they couldn't get a job. And so they had their property for 10 years, but when the time came and they came and
Yeah,
had a family, and so it's not about land speculation
No.
But
or,
that's driving the cost up for everybody else as well, like just the cumulative impact of people doing that.
of not building, so, yeah, like that's,
well,
I get their circumstances, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean,
that's just smart financial planning to buy ahead to, like, people have done that for retirement. You know, they know they want to come north, but their jobs aren't here.
so I guess,
So
is it our
that's
job,
just-
is it our job to make them super comfortable when they do it, or do they have to plug in their kayaks every time? I would say, I guess they have to plug in their kayaks every time, right? So that's fair that they want to do it, that they want to, we plan to build in 10 years. Well, in the meantime, you're not able to store, I mean, you can store things to your property, just not covered in an accessory building, right? Wrap it in a tarp, I guess that's,
Well, I wouldn't want to put my valuables in an unsupervised building, so I wouldn't do it.
yeah,
But just a quick point
Yeah.
on that though would be that say somebody bought it 10 years ago here, looking ahead to the future, say, and not yet saved enough to be able to build something.
Yeah.
There's other people that are moving in, say from down south, that are selling up properties that are worth a lot more than here. And so they're moving here and they're acquiring this land, but then they have the cash in the bank to build outright. It doesn't mean that they should have precedence over the people that have had this land forever, because everybody's got a right to live here if they purchase property, but some people are jumping in and they need these guidelines faster to help them establish what they want to achieve in the property, and there's other people that
Yeah.
have maybe let the land go derelict. Some people have maintained it. There's a whole range of circumstances around land that has not been developed or managed over time. Does that make sense?
No. I think people do, I mean, investors do that all the time,
Yeah,
buy land and hold it for 20 years.
but some people are actively looking to move here or build or to grow as part of this community, or is it just sitting on the land?
So I think what he's saying is these policies will help them, right? So the policies are about how do we help them build a house? So yes, they need a storage.
Well, they can go buy another
then-
property.
Yeah, but when it comes to the storage thing, so they come, they buy, they're going to
Yeah.
build,
Yeah.
but they need a storage building. So our bylaws, like, how do we balance that? I think that's what you're trying to say, is how do we balance that? So there are people who are coming to build, they want to have the storage, accessory building,
Mhm.
and then they will build their house. They're perfectly fine signing the agreement within 24 months. Yeah, I'll have my house built, because they're fine with it, because they're actively doing it. I think that's what the
Yeah.
point is, as opposed to someone who is buying it because they know they can't come for 10 years, but they still want to enjoy their property,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
like, I think we won't make everybody happy. Our policies can't make everybody happy because, again, we can't we can't make policies for people, we make policies for land use. So we can't make everyone happy, but how do we balance out the safety and the solutions that we need?
It's about.
Just looking for ideas on what those balancing acts are, right? So how do we do that?
and it can't, like, in my opinion, it can't be, you own a piece of property, you do whatever you want. Like,
No.
it's the Wild Wild West, do whatever you want, you own the property, like that would be terrible municipal planning. That we would be the only municipality in the known universe that would
I
say
was
that,
just wondering, you know, from other people, oh, they own that vacant lot, maybe they cut wood on it, so where do they store their stuff? They can't have an accessory building, that's all.
Yeah,
They want a garden,
I get it makes it tougher for them, like,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that it makes it tougher for them, for sure.
And we're surrounded by township without municipal organization
Yes.
where they can put whatever they want.
Yeah.
We're
They
in
can
Boulder
put-
Township. We have got Boulder
Yeah.
Township, we have got on Talon Lake across from there,
Ulrich.
there's
Phelps,
Ulrich
Phelps, yeah.
Township. And they can do whatever they want, cause there's no municipal organization. But
Part of the reason people want to live in a municipality is for that structure. If those that don't want that structure very much seek the unorganized townships, the unorganized areas, right?
Oh, so, and some people from down south are, like, I never try to buy a piece of property in Phelps.
Yeah,
You can't. It's in demand.
yeah, for sure, because people don't want to have to deal with the CBOs, right, Mike?
Come on.
And so anyways, it was just a question, why can't have a little thing to just store your stuff that you're gonna use when you're visiting your
Kayaks
property?
become very tough to answer the question on, but I would think like, hey, listen, you go to Canadian Tire and you get one of those like,
A rack and
Yeah.
chain them up.
yeah, like, or a deck box. And you have a deck box that you throw a few things in, like, you're taking the chance of it getting stolen, but. I mean, yeah, you can keep your gardening tools in a deck box, like, that's not even close to a structure,
Mhm.
so. Like,
Okay, I was just wondering. why.
yeah,
Okay. So are we okay with these parameters, kind of like, we'll just formalize
Yeah.
that 18 months has to be at the same time? Okay, and this, the same time really does allow us to be able to evaluate the site plan, to see where the house is, to make sure everything's meeting those setbacks too, so.
so
It's
I
a
guess.
clean way of doing it.
The only question I would walk forward, it gets to, it's 23 months, somebody's been actively working on building their property. They're not gonna make the deadline. What is the mechanism for them to get an extension? Is that strictly through? Is that through council? Is that through staff? Yeah,
I don't, Mike, what is the minimum time? Like, is it 6 months that you can revoke, or is it a year?
So they say 6 months, you must have substantial start, but up north, we give them a year typically. But I mean, even that, we don't actively, act upon those, I've revoked a couple that, but they were like, I mean, 3-4 years, overdue, you know what I mean? So we have some on file that are, much older than a year. But they're working on getting their stuff, so we work with the people, so.
but if they're coming in once every month, they put a 2x4 up. Well, that's not exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
Financially,
That's probably all you can
Right.
afford.
That's a small investment all in itself, yeah.
You won't be able to afford the sheet of plywood.
Yeah.
so we must remember that's substantial start. So if you have your foundation in and a little bit of framing, that's substantial, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's not at a completion.
You have invested quite a bunch of money to get to that point, for sure. Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear that, that work with them and if extensions are required and.
Yeah, and again, I mean, I'll look to Gina, and Mary and Eric, but, do we feel that we should be adding kind of the same language that we talked about the shipping containers, the look and feel? Again, it's a community thing, right? Where,
But
Well,
is
I
that
see
in our
the community.
property standards? Are you talking about aesthetically pleasing?
yeah,
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, we want a nice looking community. And
mhm.
it's a work in progress, but we want improvements. That's
So
all.
one's easier to enforce than the other, right? Property standards is tougher to enforce
Yeah.
than this? Right.
It's a bylaw.
Sorry, Mike, are you,
Nope, just,
okay, they're both tough to enforce. But we are going to implement the administrative monetary penalty program in our bylaws. So having the bylaw and having it through that will make it easier, but property standards are not eligible for the AMP process, so.
Right, so we
Yeah,
can
not-
fine people for
Yes.
not, right, and we can't in.
The other system
property
is
standards.
Provincial Offences Act, so you have to, the person has to go to court, they have, like, you have to. It's a lot more time consuming and a lot more onerous on the, on the offender than.
So
Yeah.
are there local municipalities doing this, like is East Ferris, Calvin?
We all talk about it, I don't know if they have or not, it's a far simpler process to do bylaw enforcement.
So, I mean, that's
Right.
just what. Because I haven't heard of this before, that, I don't know,
I think North Bay does it, so check out North Bay's.
yeah, but
bylaw.
North Bay is 54,000 people. So I just wondering,
I implemented it in Burks Falls, if you wanna look at Burks Falls, it's really kind of easy, so.
yeah, but I mean, it's. You know, for our community, is that something you as counselors would want to implement?
Yeah,
Like
so-
a fine or?
I hear a lot about property standards, and so we have our property standards bylaw, but if that's harder to enforce because that's gotta go through provincial offenses. Like, we can trigger that to happen, but that's a multiple steps versus. Hey, listen, we'll get people to pay attention, like clean up your property or else you're gonna get an X number of dollar fine. Then it's much more in our control to be able to like some leeway there, some not leeway, some, you know. If somebody's being non-compliant and like, yeah, we'll just issue a fine, right? So. I mean, they're both enforceable, it's just one allows a lot more leniency and latitude and it's more in our control, and the other one is very onerous. Somebody has to go to court, somebody has to,
And,
This way the applicant just comes in, there's still appeal process, there's still lots of different mechanisms.
but
for
is
it
it
to-
something like, that's all I wanted to know is. If we're doing what's. You know, in our other neighborhoods, like why hasn't East Ferris, they're much larger. Why have they not implemented? So the pros and cons, you know, have we looked at the pros and cons and what other municipalities are doing about that? So I just don't want, again, for us to be more heavy than our adjoining communities.
I think.
Yeah.
And not that other communities don't have an aesthetics problems, because some do, but we are particularly challenged with some of the properties that we've been encountering. From a property standards piece. I mean, Mike, you're dealing with that regularly. I'm sure we get complaints, and we've got, I mean, I know I
Yes.
get calls, Mary, I'm sure you get calls about various properties or garbage accumulating on a trunk road property or,
Vermin.
yeah, vermin, yeah.
Yeah, and the AMP, I mean, I know this isn't packed, but the AMP process is, you know, we might say,
Yeah.
you know, you get a 14-day warning, if you haven't done it, then you get the $50 fine. Then you just come in, you have your chance to appeal, you come here, you can schedule it on your timeline, you don't have to take a day off of work, hire a lawyer and go to court.
Mhm.
So, and if you go to court, it's a $500 fine, so this allows us to really streamline things.
And I'm just wondering, have we looked at why is it a problem? Is it money or they just don't have the help or the background?
And exactly what you're saying is, we don't, I understand that, like you're saying, well, it's overdue. And that's possibly true. However, we don't want to be known as the enforcers. We're going after everybody. I think that it's necessary, but
Is there another way we could do it, like
I
have
know
cleanup days?
I've tried with some people,
Public
and
works.
it's not an easy task, but I don't know. I just,
We don't come to work to target people on a
No.
day-to-day basis. We're dealing with very
And
specific
you know-
examples.
Yeah, but
And nobody has heard that we're the enforcers right now, and you know, we're out
then you haven't heard.
continuously.
Then you
Yeah.
You haven't heard,
the
yeah.
numbers.
yeah.
You haven't
So
heard
I'm just
everything.
wondering if we should always look at other options. Have we
You
tried
mean-
other things?
Working
always-
with the people possibly,
Yeah.
Yeah.
or I don't know,
happy to work with anybody in any
Or a
solution,
cleanup
but I
day.
can, yeah,
These are great suggestions.
Sure.
Yeah, like
absolutely.
I like, because sometimes I sit at meetings and I always find how we're not, I mean, how we're not gonna allow something, but not many meetings I go to is, what can we do to help them? Is there other options that we can try?
yeah. So I don't know
Like
what a
have-
cleanup day looks like, cause does that turn into free dump fees? Does that turn, because, I mean, then it becomes a bit of a challenge from, like, everything has a ripple effect, like the,
Yeah.
yeah, but.
But it's better in the landfill than it is.
Yeah,
If
How
if
do you
they
get a
can't afford
private-
it.
How do you get a private person to allow people, because we've tried this and I know for sure on one property standards that we're dealing with, we did try to organize a group of people to come in to help clean up the yard. And they refused.
Mhm.
So how do you, if we had a community day, which I know we're completely off topic on
Yeah.
that,
No, no,
so I'm sorry to divert,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
how do you, like, we can't force somebody to allow people to come onto their property and clean
No.
up.
Yeah, and there might be that one, but there might be the one that
Yeah.
says,
But
hey,
that's how we
I-
are working with them, right? So we do try to do those things, I just wanna point, like, we do, but if they don't accept our help. Then, so we work with everybody as long as we possibly can, and, you know, we give extensions on orders all the time,
Yeah.
but it's how we. Right? Like, well, definitely
do.
not that.
You know-
We're constantly working with them, but when someone doesn't wanna work with you, then what do you do?
Yeah, so and I get like, our job here tonight is to jump to the end of that,
Yes.
right? Like, and it's to say, okay, like, all of these things the staff have done, but what is our true enforcement ability, right? That's what our job is to discuss here and create it into a bylaw. Cause at the end of the day, it also has to protect their neighbors'
Yeah.
property value,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
property standards are terrible, and then all of a sudden, you know, my house or your house is impacted because your neighbor has
Yeah.
terrible property standards. Well, that's not fair either, and they
Or you
should be
can't
looking to the
even
municipality
buildings.
and saying,
But
what are you
finding
doing to
them-
help me, right?
But finding them, if they can't afford it, how are you gonna get the fine?
Well, but, yeah, well, property taxes, yeah, yeah.
Like I
It's a
realize,
last resort, it really is a last.
We are
resort.
talking last resorts here, but we have to have a mechanism to make it uncomfortable for people to not take the effort or to take the support and the help to fix their property
Yeah.
before it comes to this, right? Like, and that's, our staff do try and provide extensions that I've personally advocated on an extension for somebody with council. I've like, and everyone's open to it. So like, some of the more egregious properties around town, council has even said, sure, as long as there is progress being made. Like, there is a deadline, but we'll extend the deadline for extenuating circumstances. We'll do all of that. We're open to all of that, but at the end of the day, it can't be extension on extension on extension 7 years later.
No.
It's still like, you know,
but I was just wondering if the fine is really even gonna work, and how often are you gonna then use that mechanism
Could
for,
be a disincentive, if anything, to stop it getting to that stage, so.
yeah,
right.
Yes.
you know, like if there's free dump runs, or Public Works can pick up their stuff, or even if they have to,
Yeah.
But there's
You know,
no
Public
change in
Works
that.
picking up their stuff. Oh, boy.
no,
Yeah.
that they wanna dispose of,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they don't have
We
the
have a new
means.
Yeah.
compactor. We-
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll just squash it up.
Like, I'm just,
And a lot of the laws change around recycling and what can be done with what.
Yeah.
It's materials, there's a lot to look at
A
there as well.
lot.
Oh, for sure.
This is a piece of the pie.
yeah,
A piece
yeah.
of the elephant is way bigger than a pie, yes, this is
Yeah.
just a small.
Oh,
piece.
no, I realize that it's
Yeah.
not easy in even
Yeah.
the larger communities to get a property cleaned up. I'm well
Oh,
aware of
yeah.
that. And so I was just wondering how really effective that would be if you can't get them to clean it up.
Yeah.
And like Jason says, there are issues, but sometimes those issues have been that way for 20 years.
100%.
Yeah.
How do you get that cleaned up in a?
Right.
It's not getting
You
cleaned
get
up
it
fast.
cleaned up.
Yeah,
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it becomes personal. It's their
yeah.
stuff, their
Yeah.
beloved stuff. in some,
That's why
in
they
some
work with
cases.
people for years to do it.
Mhm.
Yeah, to
Yeah.
get it that messy, then.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Well,
last thing as a municipality we ever want to do, because a fine that goes unpaid goes on to taxes. Taxes
Yeah.
go unpaid, taxes aren't collected, then it becomes, a foreclosure on.
Yeah,
That's the last thing a municipality ever
Absolutely.
wants to have happen, right? So we would take lots of measures to try and prevent that from happening.
Mhm.
so you
Thank you.
kind of have a procedural guide, what you do for people that you're having issues with.
And it's based on individual circumstances as much as we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But like if somebody's willing to work with the municipality and accept help or whatever that looks like, or is actively working on something, I don't think you'd ever see a municipality say, I can see you worked your butt off for the last 4 weeks, but we gave you 4 weeks and 1 day to get it done. Too late. Like, I don't think you'd ever see
And
that.
it's almost, you can't even do it.
Right, no, exactly, like, I mean, it's trying to be, it's putting some reason to it as well, for sure, but. Unfortunately, we have to govern to those that are just gonna give
Oh,
the
you
old
have to
middle
go for
finger.
property standards.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was just wondering what.
And we have to put it in place for those people that are gonna decide to say the big, no, thank you municipality and not such nice terms. And ignore everything, then what, right?
It's the first I've heard of the tariff or fee or whatever.
Well, we have set fines right now, they're just far more expensive. So we have that mechanism right now, we're
But
just looking
then,
at doing something different.
if they don't comply, then. When the bylaw enforcement officer lays a charge,
Mhm.
then they have to go to court,
Yeah.
right?
Current.
That's what we do currently, yeah. The new system or the proposed system, which will come to council, well, we've talked about it before, but that will be a far less intrusive system.
And exactly how would that work?
So after we've worked with someone and we can't get compliance, then you fine them. And then that fine, it doesn't go to the court, it goes to the municipality when they pay that fine. They're usually less than the POAs that we get. And then, so you would have a screening officer, so they would have the opportunity to appeal. They have a screening officer and then they have a hearing officer who's typically a lawyer or a paralegal, and then they have that opportunity to appeal too, so they have 2 appeal mechanisms. And then those 2 people get to decide whether the fine stays, or it can be lessened, or it can, it can be waived if there's circumstances. But it's still a very formal process, we have to bring in the evidence, we have to bring in our evidence, they bring in theirs. So still a very formal process.
Well, we could just do the cleanup campaign and.
Yeah.
And hopefully never have to find any.
Right, I mean, the intent is we never,
Yeah.
compliance is the intent.
Absolutely, you're right,
Yes.
yeah. That's like anything, a speeding fine is a speeding fine, because the hope is that you won't speed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing, this is a fine in hopes that people won't let their property get to the point where they need to be fined, right?
We'll have to think on that one.
Okay, well, it's outside the parameters of.
Yes, yes,
meeting,
yeah, that's what I meant. I was
Yeah.
like-
So it's been a great discussion, honestly, everybody, and so do we want to move forward to close the meeting or?
You betcha. Any other points of discussion before we move on from any of the committee members? Hearing none, we'll move to the adjournment. I need a mover and a seconder. Moved by member Paquette, seconded by member Langua, that this meeting be adjourned at 8:46 p.m.
Long then.
It's been a
All
long
in favor?
time.
1, all in favor? 2, all right, there we go, carried. I'm like waiting for a majority. All right, thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Right.
Night. Night.